So I would like to begin this meeting by acknowledging that the land on which we gather is situated with the traditional and treaty territory of the Mississaugas, more specifically the Mississaugas of Scugog Island First Nation, signatories of the Gunshot Treaty of 1788 and the Williams Treaty of 1923. This land is and will continue to be home to the Indigenous peoples. Let us acknowledge the mistakes and traumas of the past through authenticity and support, truth, and reconciliation. Let us engage and celebrate Indigenous communities by being leaders of action in acknowledging the United Nations Declaration on the Rights of Indigenous Peoples and the Truth and Reconciliation Commission's recommendations towards truth and reconciliation. Let us keep these principles close as we continue towards truth and reconciliation and as we move forward with kindness and respect as a community. Are there any disclosure of pecuniary interests from council? Seeing none, okay. Can I please have adoption of the minutes for the regular meeting? Okay, all in favor? It's good, thank you. Are there any questions on that before we? Yes, it was. Thank you. Okay, and I do have some polls. Sorry. I didn't vote, right?
No, actually, all of us didn't.
Is it up there? Okay, so I don't know how to vote on this. Okay. So I do have some polls on today's agenda. So I have Councillor Collier who pulled Mayor Collier, I should say, 4.3, 4.6, 4.7, 4.8, and 4.9. And I had Regional Councillor Crawford who pulled 4.10 and 4.11. Are there any other polls for the agenda?
4.10 and 11?
Yep.
Sorry, I pulled those as well, yeah. Okay.
So we're good? Okay. So Mayor Collier will be coming on later. He'd like us to hold the 4.3 until later. So we're going to start with, yes, thank you. You're ahead of me. All in favor of moving the balance of the agenda? Okay, thank you. I don't know how to do this. Marilyn, why don't we, do you mind if we do yours first, and we'll do that and see if Mayor Collier is able to join us quicker. So yours is 4.10?
Yes.
My one question with this, I'm totally in favor of this, is the tickets that are issued through the private property parking, are they all then processed through the AMPS program? Or is that a different program, the old program?
Through the chair to Councillor Collier, they're all processed through the AMPS program.
Through the AMPS, okay, perfect. Okay, that's it, that's all I had questions. And it's Crawford.
Okay. That's it? Can I call a vote? You have a question, Nancy? Go ahead. Sorry, Councillor Henry. Okay, go ahead.
Thank you. So through the chair, I wanted to ask a question with regards to page 46 verses 48 on, or Yeah, 46 versus 48. When I looked at the report, I noticed it said there is mention of informal training by the town of Ajax. And I think that was prior to the AMP system in relationship to those who would be issuing the tickets. And then on page 48, I'm noticing that there is a formal training process. So my question is, why is there a difference in the training, and has that affected the level of service the public has received from private companies authorized to issue tickets on private property? And what will that look like going forward? Will they be requested to come back in for formal training? Through the chair to Mr. Hanna.
Through the chair to Councillor Henry, the informal portion we do now is it's just scheduled with whoever's available in the office to be able to take that on. Moving forward, it will be a formal process where maybe once a week we will hold training sessions for individuals to come in and get trained. And at the same time, we're working at creating an online module that people will be able to log into and be able to do that training online and then be available for any questions they may have. It's no less quality, the system we have in place now. It'll just be a lot more formal where we will be keeping permanent records of who got trained when. The existing staff have already been trained that are issuing on private property, so there won't be any need for them to redo it. It's anyone new appointed from this point.
So how does that work when we look at companies that have this existing ability now and they hire new staff? Are they then required to come back through the town of Ajax training procedure, the same training that we're going to be offering and have offered, or are they trained by their staff on site?
So every time that a new individual, whether it's private property appointing a staff member or a security company that's been appointed, bring on any new staff, the appointment that we do has to be redone, listing all the new people and any of the new properties that they may take over. So we would make sure that every person appointed needs a new appointment, and we would do the training on those individuals.
Oh, well, thank you. That's good information to know. With regards to Falby Court, and it came up just because, it's not my ward, but it came up just because I remember that a while back they were given the permission to write tickets there. So when we as councillors get residents that call us and say, you know, we're getting tickets, and then we as council know it's private property, we have no say in that, obviously, as we don't in your department. So what happens as far as when we're granting, like right now as a council, we're granting these permissions, we're making the governing decisions, but then it follows through to your department and your department only. So are we relinquishing a lot of responsibility here?
So through the chair, it actually, that permission was delegated years ago. So staff have been handling the appointments internally for, I would say now almost 8 to 10 years that we've been doing it internally. Used to be a formal bylaw that had to be passed. Now staff do the appointments.
Okay.
And we have been for the last 10 years.
And I had a question, one more last question, with regards to something like the Costco Plaza. So we know that we've had requests almost a year ago now when we were there for their anniversary from management to have bylaw come out, patrol the area, the fire route, issue tickets. We also know we don't have the staff to do that ongoing. So will this grant something like Costco that ability to hire their own staff for the parking issue and ticket and regulate that area?
Through the chair to Councillor Henry, they already have that authority now and have had it for the last 30 years if that's what they chose to do. Staff will go in and enforce fire routes and accessible parking as it's a mandated requirement of law. We don't need permission to go on to private property for those two offenses. We can't issue tickets anywhere else on the property without the owner signing off on the ticket, so we only issue those two types. If it was people leaving vehicles in plazas, parking outside designated parking spaces, parking parallel to the road, the lines on the parking lot, they would have to have appointments for private property people to be able to go in and do that, and most of them have security companies that do that for them.
And with the security company could also issue the same ticket for fire routes, correct? That you would issue?
Correct.
So there, an additional service, let's say.
Correct. And once the appointment is done to private property, they're deemed to be the private property owner. Town staff are not deemed to be private property owners. That's why we can only issue the 2 tickets for fire routes and accessible.
Okay, thank you. And I wasn't trying to imply you weren't doing your job. What I was trying to imply is there's a lot of plazas, there's a lot of complaints, and we just don't have enough bylaw to be in every plaza at every moment of every day. So it's nice to see, these permissions granted. Thank you.
Thank you. Councillor Collier, did you have a question on 4.10? Mayor Collier, I'm sorry.
No, just letting you know I am here, Chair, and ready to proceed when we get to those other items. Thank you.
Great, thank you. So Councillor Crawford, you want to move this? You have a question? Go ahead. Sorry, Lisa.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Good afternoon, Mr. Hannon. So, interesting report, thank you. Just ballpark, how many private properties in Ajax currently does the town have these arrangements with? And I'm sorry if it was in the report and I missed it.
Through the chair, I think we're somewhere around 20 properties currently.
Okay.
And probably 127 individuals, whether it's security or individuals from private property that are appointed.
Okay, all right, thank you. That was my only question.
Councillor Tyler Moran?
Thank you, Chair, Madam Chair. To you, Mr. Hannon. It says in the financial implications that the new program will generate approximately $17,700. So if you're the landowner, if Bob Smith or whoever is the landowner, they're not getting any of that revenue. That revenue comes back to us and is used for the cost of the program. And there could even be some, just confirming as per the, because I just was wondering if, okay, so if you could.
Through the chair to Councillor Tyler Moore. That revenue that's coming in is what the private property, the security companies, and the individuals appointed that will pay for their yearly fees to be able to do that. They generate somewhere about $120,000 in revenue to the town for the tickets that they issue on private property.
I see.
And that will compensate and cover the supervisor of parking services, their time to do the training, the appointments, the inspections on site, to make sure their signage is correct, make sure that their site plans are up to date, that reflect correctly how the property's designed.
Right, so it's not just a service that we provide to private property for nothing. There's a cost to it, to the owners, to keep things clear and clean and running smoothly.
Correct. These additional revenues will create it as revenue or cost neutral.
Yeah, got it. Okay, thank you so much. Just wanted to confirm that. Thank you.
Any further questions? So a motion to approve by Regional Councillor Crawford. And vote, please. Thank you. So Regional Councillor Crawford, we'll go to your next poll for 4.11, and then we'll go back to the top of the agenda. Are you? No, I don't want you to talk.
My only question to you is, how has this new procedure been received?
So like all change, it's been a slow process that some people have found that it's another administrative system that the town's using to try and confuse things. The majority of feedback that we have been getting is what used to take a year and a half to go through the courts, we're handling administrative penalties in and around a 6-week window from the time that they're issued till they've gone in front of a hearing officer. And even though at the end of the day, people may still have to pay their parking penalty notices, they're appreciating the speed in which the system manages the process now. We're maintaining our screening, so people are submitting their screenings within 3 days, not even business days. So they're submitting their concerns as to why they got the penalty notice, and within 3 days they're getting notification of what the town's decision is based on that. So I think all in all, in the last 3 months, people have recognized that it's a much smoother system than the traditional one, and realizing that we have a fair review system It was one of the concerns that were identified is that the town moving it away from the courts into internal would start to show preference towards the town. And I think the feedback we're getting is people think it's just as fair today as it was a year ago or 10 years ago.
So it's been said that our parking fees went up. Can you explain that? I know it didn't, but can you explain that?
So in the old POA system, the Provincial Offences Act, there was the set fine, and then there was a process in which there was an early payment option. That was written into the act that gave somebody about a third off the cost. When we brought the AMPS report forward, we went with the set fines, the provincial approved parking fees that we had. We chose at the time not to increase those, except for 2 offenses for both being winter control. We increased those fines, but the remainder of them stayed at the set fine mark. What people see now is when they get their AMP, there's not an early payment option for a deduction, there's only the set fine.
Okay. Thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Are there any further questions, Councillor Henry?
Thank you. It wasn't one of my questions, but I will ask, why didn't we allow an early payment? Why didn't we be equal with what was before?
So through the chair to Councillor Henry, it would have been another administrative process for us to manage about when those tickets were paid. We believe the set fine was according. We hadn't increased it in the last 6 years. So just removing the early payment was to keep it at the set fine that was already identified. It was the position that we came forward at the time when we brought forward the AMP process, and it was the recommendation of staff that we keep it at the same set fine as we currently have.
I remember that, but I don't remember there being anything in the report saying I guess we missed it, that there wouldn't be an option for an early payment. Because I have had a few emails about that, and that's a good question.
Well, I appreciate that it might be a good question, but it's not under the administrative monetary penalty system. The reduction was in the provincial.
I think we both, oh, there we go. Okay.
It deals with the court. It wasn't a decision for us. It was mandated under the Provincial Offences Act, which we don't use anymore. We're now using the Municipal Act to run an AMP system, and it was the decision that we recommended, and it was what was approved and what was put in place.
Got it. Okay, so with regards to page 54, there's a mention of a brochure that will be created to give folks more information about, I guess, stage 2 that we're going into. Is that correct? Stage 2?
Yes.
So I want to know how this is going to be given out, because if I'm getting emails now about and questions, and we've had some answers from your department, which were great. You know, folks were worried about, like you said, if it would be internal and who would be making the judgment on these things, the same person that gives the ticket, and worried about an unfair playing field, to which we've responded, our office has responded to all those questions and concerns. How will this be distributed to the general public? Are we talking about mailing this out to everyone so they all know? Are we talking social media?
It'll be through the town's communication channels as we usually do. It'll be updating our website. And I'm sure many of you have heard that when we started the AMP system, for the first 10,000 AMPs that we issued, we stapled business cards on them with an educational point. So every person that got an AMP could be redirected to an info page to give them more information. When we move into phase 2, which will replace what used to be called Part 1 tickets, it's the ones for dogs at large, the waterfront for drinking on the waterfront, or bonfires, whatever the case may be, we will staple those information cards as well. The public does not really understand the difference between a parking ticket and a penalty notice, or a Part 1 or a phase 2 of our AMP program. But the process for AMPs is not going to change, whether it's a ticket that's issued on the waterfront or a parking ticket. The processes will still be the same, but we'll redirect people where they need to and do whatever necessary press releases, whatever the case may be that we need to do to educate when we're ready to roll out phase 2.
Agreed. Between 1 and 2, folks aren't going to be looking at that. What they're going to be looking at is where do they go to pay the ticket, and why is the process changed. So you didn't mention this. Will there be a hard copy? Like, will there be a brochure, an actual physical brochure for folks that don't have internet or that type of channel to receive the information that will be given out?
Through the chair to Councillor Henry, it would not be our intent now. We could create something that somebody could pick up at the front counter, but we wouldn't be doing mass mailouts. It would be an information document that would be handed to them at the time that they receive the ticket, the same as we do for the Provincial Offences Act tickets that we give out now too.
So we're not, that's what I was getting at. So we're not having a rollout of this, like, we've changed our process, here's the pamphlet, blah, 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 everybody gets one. What we're doing is, once you get an offense, congratulations, here's your offense, here's your brochure, now you know where to pay your offense. That's what we're doing.
Through the chair, correct. No, I
Correct.
wouldn't go with the congratulations, but yes, pretty close to that, yeah.
All right. Paraphrasing a little there. Okay, thank you for that information, much appreciated.
Thank you, Chair. So a couple of questions that I have that have come up through discussion. So the fees that are set on AMPs, how are they, do we have the ability to update those, or is it manually done, or as our fees change? How does that process work?
So it talks briefly about it in the report, but
Yes.
this indication will allow us to start bringing back bylaws that we're going to be incorporating into the AMP system, because there's some penalties we don't want in the AMP system. We want them to remain in the courts. So the process is we have to designate specific offenses. We will be bringing those forward, and at the time that we bring those forward, we will also be doing a comparison of what our neighbors are and whatever the case may be to come up with that fee structure, so it will come before council again through
Right.
those bylaws.
And then will these fees on AMPs be reviewed annually, and we need to make changes to them? Like, how does that happen, or is it, how are the fees set or changed?
So it would be a staff-driven
Okay.
process on those fees. The administrative fees that get added on is part of our fees and charges bylaw that we review every year.
Okay.
So the administrative costs we would review. The penalty cost is something that we review regularly with our neighbors anyhow to see if we're online.
Okay, great, thank you. And regarding those bylaw penalties that are coming on, and in the report, you mentioned that once they're added to AMPs, they cannot be removed. So I guess that means we can't get something wrong here, right? Like, how are you determining that, and what happens if we do get something wrong?
So through the chair to Councilor Bauer, we're hoping we don't get it wrong.
Yeah.
The issue is that once something is designated, it can never come back into the POA world. So the project that staff will be going through now is trying to figure out which offenses have a maximum fine that we would be looking to say that is a suitable penalty. Things we have to, as a dog bite, we want to consider that maybe we need to create new offenses about a dog bite. And talk about severity, that if somebody is severely injured, we may still want to have the ability to take that matter before the court. So we might create two different dog biting offenses, one minor, one major, and have to define what those differences are to figure out one is going to be designated in the AMPS process, the other one won't be. We can issue charges under our property standards or for our clean and clear for grass to be too high. But if we issue a notice on a property that might belong to a hoarder that we believe is a way more serious issue, we might not allow the failure to comply with a notice to go through the AMPS process, that's something we would prefer to go to the courts because of its severity.
Okay.
Could I jump in on this point as well, Madam Chair? I just wanted to make the point that we're not necessarily on the cutting edge of AMPS in terms of bringing over Part 1s. There's lots of municipalities, not necessarily in Durham, but in York Region and to the west of Toronto that have quite a bit of experience with Part 1s in an AMP system. So Derek's very much in touch with his colleagues in those places and learning from their experiences about issues they've had as they start to bring over some of these other offenses. And so we're keeping a very close eye on that, and that's informing the recommendations that we bring before you as far as which offenses we see as being suitable to be moved under the AMPS program.
Okay, thank you for that, and thank you for your answer too. So just using the dog bite as an example, because I know we recently looked at the bylaw for dogs and cats, et cetera, pets. So would there ever be a circumstance on any of these AMPS offenses that, let's say you would issue an AMPS, but then also it could go the old route to the courts?
So the offense in itself, we'd have to have two completely different offenses.
yeah.
And one would be run through the AMP system, the other one would be POA. We would have to have some differences that would make those two offenses separate. And it would probably be based on the severity.
Right. So you could, I mean, there could be a case where a resident could actually have 2 offenses or more, and some of it could go through AMPS and some of it could go through,
Correct, but not through the same incident.
not for the same charge.
One might be allowing dog to bite, another one might be allowing a dangerous dog to bite.
Sure.
Dangerous being going through the court system, and the other one being something that we would deem to be a little minor.
Okay. Okay. All right. Thank you very much. Those are my questions.
Hi, and I'll just preface this by saying I know there's probably a scenario where we can talk to you one-on-one to iron out some of these details, but I'll ask once, and Councilor Henry kind of touched on it already. Is there a scenario, or what happens if somebody, quote-unquote, walks into town hall and says, you want to dispute the ticket? Is that completely removed, that option?
Through the chair to Councilor Todd Warren. So it would be the exact same process as our parking scenarios now. They would do a screening. The screening officer would review all the evidence. If they opted it or decided there was an error, whatever the case may be, they have the full power to reduce, whatever the case may be, to cancel. If they disagreed with the screening officer, then they would go to the third-party hearing officer.
Got it.
The same process as parking right now.
Yeah, and I think you probably already know what I'm getting at is that when we're talking to residents, you know, in a very frontline position, you could be walking on the street and somebody says, hey, got a ticket, what do I do? Obviously, we want to steer them in the right, you know, like be all on the same page, if you will. But there's those scenarios, again, which my colleagues have already touched on. So I guess they still have that option if they want to come in through the front door and just have a conversation.
They wouldn't, they would have the option to log on and do a screening.
Oh, but not come to park the car and walk in.
By the time that they receive an AMP, a decision has been made by an officer to issue a charge. So that discussion about whether they think it's fair or not is to be appropriate to go through the screening process, not for a staff discussion at the front counter.
Okay, and if we have a resident that, again, one-on-one, my last one, Chair, because we can move on. But if we have a resident that isn't on the internet, which is, you know, getting more rare, but we still have them, and they want to dispute the ticket, then I guess, sorry, go ahead.
So through the chair, it is once in a blue moon, but we do provide in-person hearings for those that don't have access to computers, whatever the case may be, so they can. But it's not with an officer, it's with a screening officer that comes into town hall at a specific time and date to meet with them.
Got it. So they would have to phone, make the arrangement, and then come in and meet them.
In person, they would come in and get set with an appointment. That
Okay.
appointment would be in the future, and then they would come in on that time and date to meet with the screening officer.
Perfect. Okay, thank you for that answer. And again, we want to be on the same page and promoting it the same way. And okay, thank you, Chair.
Are there any further questions? So can I have a motion to support the recommendation? Councillor Lee? And the vote, please. Thank you. So sorry, we're jumping around a little bit on the agenda today. We're going to still wait for Mayor Collier before we do 4.3 as he requested. So we're going to start with 4.6. Mayor Collier, are you available? You pulled this one.
Up to ask questions on 4. I did, but I was all lined up to ask questions on 4.3. So
Do you want to do that one first then? I can do that.
yeah, I'm here.
Okay. Go ahead,
You do as the chair.
4.3.
Okay, thank you, Chair. Through you to that, I believe. I found it confusing, so I would like you to clarify the budget neutral impacts on page 3 of the report, page 17 of the agenda, because our surplus is very small. However, there are a number of allocations which I think would make it a different number. Like what? Can you explain that, please?
Through the chair to Mayor Collier. So our budget neutral changes are revenues and things like our investment income, casino revenues, Lexicon revenues that come in and they have to go through our financial statements and then they're automatically transferred out to the capital reserves. So that's what the bulk of the budget neutral changes are.
Well, I understand that, but for instance, the investment income was budgeted at 8 million. It came in at 15, 86% or 84% higher. Sorry. yet we're only showing, and I understand that's not going to affect the surplus that goes into reserves, but I'm looking at, I've gone to page 16 now, where I see, for instance, budget, wages and benefits is 1.7 million more than forecast, than budgeted. The forecast is higher. And I guess I'm trying to get an understanding of why is it 1.7 higher? We know what those numbers should be.
Through the chair,
For
Mayor
example.
Collier. So it's made up of several different items. So there's contracted staff that are hired to fill in gaps for vacancies, for backfills for maternity leaves, for various things. There's overtime, there's various things that are built in there. We're also, the budget didn't necessarily contemplate all of the transitions through the exempt review. So we may have included job rate, but some positions are moving through the exempt review in 2 steps. So those are all in the actuals. So those are the things that would come through under the actuals.
Okay, so going down one line to other expenditures, we're a little over 4 million over budgeted items. I don't think that 4 million extras were approved throughout the year. So what is the explanation for that, please?
So it's various things throughout, excuse me, throughout the year. So it's vehicle and equipment maintenance, additional education and training that's provided to staff to maintain their professional designations as required by their jobs. There's, they could also be a decrease in revenues. So we may have budgeted for revenues that we didn't meet the budget timeline or budget allocation for. So it's made up of various other items, both expenditures and revenues.
Okay, so talking about revenues, I mean, the next line down, our reserve allocations are 7.5 million higher, which is where our increased investment income and the like would go. But again, that appears to be decreasing. What I see here is a much larger surplus than the 60-odd thousands that's shown. Let's look at the revenues. The revenues didn't go down, they actually went up by 2.69 million. Is 83-84% higher than projected. The grants and donations is somewhere about 500% more than what we had allocated. So the reserve allocations, that was fixed. I'm just not correlating in my mind how our surplus isn't actually about a $10 million surplus, why it's only showing as a $600,000 or a $60,000 surplus, 65.5.
Through the chair to Mayor Collier. So the investment income, we have a financial sustainability plan which stipulates the amount that goes into the budget, the operating budget, and the remainder is moved to the capital reserves for capital projects. We had a Computech grant that came in as well, so that's an in and an out. So we do need to show the revenue pieces coming in, which we also then show as an expenditure, so it's an in and out.
Okay, and I think that's the answer I was looking for, is the in and out ones, because it's looking at this, it appears the numbers should be quite a bit different if there's not the offsetting expenditure as well, but it's hard to see on this chart. I just want to talk about the investment income for a minute because, and I want to thank council for supporting this decision to go with an investment strategy, because I know it was a significant change from the norm, but about 3 years back, we had to have a serious look at our capital budgets and the way we're spending money and make some changes, because we know if we didn't make changes, we would be exhausting our capital in about 5 years based on the current spend. Having the investment income, and don't get me wrong, it's not going to do this every time, but this particular time and last year, I think last year we were about 10.9%. Those numbers of the 7 million this year and however much it was last year are funds that we never would have had we continued on with the old. So I just wanted to point that out, that the investment strategy is working. There will be some years when it's not as good and we may have some minor negative returns. But remember the 15 or 18 million we've had over the last 2 years, that over time it does work and it offsets things like the casino revenue being down by $1 million, for instance, like potential any reduction in our Lexicon dividends. It was a bit of a bold step. I think some other municipalities in the region have now followed. But again, I just wanted to point that out and thank council again for their support and bringing that forward, because it is working to get us to our goals. I think that's all my questions on this, Chair. I'm happy to move it after at the appropriate time.
Thank you, Mayor Collier. Are there any other questions from council members? So can I have a motion to receive? Councillor Sterling Lee, thank you very much. And a vote, please. Thank you. So next on the list, 4.6 was pulled by Mayor Collier. Can you speak to that? Is he there? Okay.
Yes.
Thank you.
Madam Chair. Said the press button. 4.6, the contract award, professional services. Let me just find my thing here.
Yes.
I guess this is for $150,000 for detailed design. This facility has been there for 20 odd years since the slab was done before. Why do we need a detailed design to replace an existing slab? Or two of them?
Through the chair
Go ahead.
to Mayor Collier, it's not a simple slab replacement when you're talking about ice rinks with respect to the engineering requirements associated with the sort of in-ground pipe systems that exist for the freezing of the ice that's required. It is specific engineering design requirements that we don't have in-house that are required to complete the detailed design, to put the tender specifications in place and bid the job. So it's not a simple slab replacement when you're talking about ice rinks.
Okay, thank you. I just want that clarification. I will point out, and I'm glad to see 3 million of the ICIP grant to help offset this. So good leveraging of tax dollars. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Anything further? Any other questions? So can I please have a motion to support the recommendation? Councillor Rob Tyler Moran. Thank you. So we're moving on down to 4.7, which was pulled by Mayor Collier.
I'm seeing a trend here. Thank you, Chair.
It's
I
you
have
for
a
a few
question
more
about
there.
the Microsoft.
Sorry
There
to
you go.
interrupt.
I have
I'm
a
just-
question about.
Go ahead.
Thank you. The Microsoft licenses. We have 1,300 employees approximately. It means we have approximately 1,300 email addresses. I'm not understanding why we require a Microsoft license for every person that has an email address. We have transitioned to a, what do you call it, a hoteling type work environment where there's work from home sometimes, there's work from here sometimes. I understand having a Microsoft license for every terminal or every laptop, but I don't understand needing one for every email address, essentially every staff.
Thank you. Go ahead.
Yeah, through the chair to Mayor Collier. So Microsoft licenses now are user-based, so I think that may be the simplest answer. So they are based on per user, not to change. You can have emails on like a terminal, for example, but that would be like a shared like public terminal, that type of thing. So I think the decision was made a couple years back to have every staff member have an email address for communication purposes. I think one of the main out of COVID, being able to communicate with staff, let them know of outages, things like that. That was a key decision by the town. So that's why every user that we have, regardless of your role, does have an email account. I will point out, though, that we do have different levels of email accounts. So a user who wouldn't use an email as much as, say, a full-time office worker, we pay significantly less per month for that user. It's different license levels. So obviously we graduate what we're paying per month based on what the roles are.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Walker. Just further, so in my case, I have Outlook on my phone. I have 2 other devices. Does that mean I would have 3 licenses?
Through the chair to the mayor, no. So that's one license. One license, and for council's awareness, they would have one of the top levels of licenses from security perspective. You pay more kind of to secure your senior members, but simple answer, no. One license for you. You can use on multiple devices. That's one of the keys and the good things about Microsoft is you can use it on multiple devices.
Okay. All right. Thank you. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any further questions from council? Councillor Rob Tyler Moran?
Thank you, Chair. So just tell me if this is within the scope of this line of questions for 4.7. So I understand contract award, mobile device. Sorry, I'm just getting my Microsoft license. So the town spends then estimated amount of $400,000 on these licenses, 416. In the same hand, in the next, and this is the part I was referring to, in the next matter at 4.7, or what's this, 4.6, the next one. Yeah, the contract award mobile device and wireless servers. That's another $250 for the mobile devices-ish, $250 for the wireless service-ish. So if you go back to the original, so it's all in, it's almost $1 million. Is that right? For all that?
Through the chair, ish, yes. That's right.
Yeah.
It's 3 different things. Obviously, the 3 reports you're looking at.
Yeah, it is. But I
yeah.
did the math, and it turns out to be about $85 a month. It was good for my head, and maybe good for residents that are listening to these numbers. But per device, if you add up all the devices and the computers, I think that's about 500 pieces, if you will, ish. I'm just really keeping these numbers light here. But when I divided all these numbers together, it turned out to be about $85, $80 all in per device.
Through the chair.
That
If
sound
you're
about right?
are you referring to Microsoft licenses?
And the device cost and the mobile for Rogers wireless service.
Right. So the mobile is for your phone, so that's separate.
Yeah.
Actually, I haven't run the numbers. I'm sure it's something as an individual, and again, different people, different staff members have different licenses. I
get it.
I think a key point too is like the Microsoft license isn't just like a Teams or email. It's your
Right.
Word. It's all your we call it productivity software too. So I don't have an answer. I haven't run the numbers like per person, but
Yeah.
if it's if you
so,
have, then
try to keep this as a question, but
Yeah.
my question was, where is this all going? These are one of these hidden costs that we don't really ever talk about. And it's a lot of money. But then when you break it down into each individual, and I've talked to some department heads and saying the relevance of everybody having a phone, and that's really where you work.
Yeah.
You know, if you're on site, or if you're dealing with the bylaw, or if your counselor's dealing with residents, or working with residents, we all, so I'm just saying, but all in, it's about $1 million. So I just wanted to get your opinion on that. I'll just leave it at that for now. Thank you.
Regional Councillor Lee?
Thank you, Chair. To Mr. Walker. This trend of a subscription-based model, this is across the board, across the entire technology sector. Am I wrong in saying that?
Through the chair, no, you're absolutely
So
correct.
pretty much
Yep.
you can't even buy a standalone Microsoft license per user at a rate that would be lower than our annual fee at this point, correct?
To my knowledge, no, and it wouldn't really make a lot of sense either. Because these licenses are transferable. You know, someone leaves, we're able to then take that and give it to someone else.
We've kind of,
yeah.
as a society, we've switched to a kind of a cloud-first
Absolutely, yeah.
system, and this is kind of a reflection of that, right?
Yep.
Perfect.
Yes, correct.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Are there any further questions? Okay, can I have a motion to support the recommendation? I'm going to give it to Councillor Bauer. She's dumping it. Thank you. Vote. Thank you. That's supported. So the next on our list is 4.8. Mayor Collier, you pulled that one?
Thank you, Chair. Yes, I did. I've noticed a trend where most of the larger companies and a lot of the small ones now too have gone to
We lost you.
and Mexico. Oh, sorry.
Can you start again? I'm
I've got
sorry.
5 bars. I'm seeing a trend in the markets where most of the major players and some of the minor ones have gone to packages that are now Canada, US, and Mexico, unlimited data, unlimited everything across the 3 countries. And I don't think that is an option of what we're being asked to enter here. And I don't know why, because for an example, another family member of mine was on Bell and they moved to another carrier for less money, for more data, and that 3-country plan. So as someone that travels a fair bit like I do and like staff do for business from time to time, going to the US and getting hit for a $15 a day roaming charge when I know I can get a 70 gig unlimited 3-country plan for $35 a month at another carrier, I'm asking this question. Why are we not looking at those plans instead of this one, which is Canada only? I guess that's Mr. Walker.
Yep, through the chair to Mayor Collier. So this plan was awarded through the provincial vendor of record. So this was the province went out to the main carriers, just to give a bit of background, and Rogers was awarded it. So I do want to point out, part of this plan, the U.S. is, so roaming in the U.S., for example, is highly reduced. So it's $5 a day to roam in the U.S. And really, outside of the U.S., it's about $12 a day for everywhere else in the world. My answer to you would be, based on this being a provincial VOR, the province of Ontario awarding it, they most likely were focused on Canada and the U.S. because that's where the majority of their business would be. But again, outside of that, I think the $12 a day for roaming everywhere else in the world is pretty good. Also, just to flag, like our monthly costs here for our staff is about 68% less than it was previously as well. So there's some pretty major savings here for us in terms of our monthly plans.
So if the province awarded this, are we absolutely committed to going? Like, do we not have an option?
If we wanted, through the chair to the mayor, if we wanted to use the VOR, yes, we have to go with Rogers. If we wanted to do the procurement on our own, then as far as I know, we'd be able to go with whoever won that procurement.
Okay, fair enough. But Rogers also has these 3-country plans. So it's not like it's not available. It's just the province limited their scope apparently.
Yeah, through the chair to the mayor, we could talk to them in terms of this deal, respectively. We wouldn't be able to do that, but could we do something outside? I'm not totally sure. We could talk to them about that on individual cases. I can't guarantee what the result there would be, but for using this VOR, it wasn't one of the line items.
Interesting. Okay. Well, my solution is I just don't use my town phone outside. I usually have a separate phone when I travel, but I see this as an easy solution for that, and probably a broad one for anybody on town staff that ever has to go to the US for business, which we all generally do from time to time. So, I mean, it's offered, it's just not part of the plan. Anyway, I will leave that suggestion with you if you could look into it, please.
Yep, no problem.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mayor Collier. Regional Councillor Lee?
Thank you, Chair. Is it also fair to assume that retention offers are going to offer things that are not offered through corporately negotiated bulk contracts. I think what the mayor's suggesting is, again, like, I don't think the average consumer can get the 3-country thing. I think that is a retention play. We don't necessarily have the offer to get a retention consumer plan corporately, correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Lee, I'm going to honestly say I'm not totally sure. That's not something we've looked at. We've used this particular VR since 2015. I don't know any other municipality who doesn't. I'm sure there are some who don't. So but again, I think from my perspective and looking at our staff's use, the monthly charge for unlimited data has just gone.
Let me flip the question.
Yeah.
Each cell phone line is the same in terms of the services provided, right?
Correct.
So if we were to hypothetically negotiate for Caribbean, Europe, US plan, that would have to apply to all devices and that would increase the cost. Is that a fair assumption?
That would be a fair assumption.
Right. So I think based on usage for town employees, I think this is a very fair offer. Now, do I think the big 3 carriers have a triopoly that is completely gouging Canadian citizens? Yes, but that's nothing we can necessarily do anything here. So yeah, I do think for the IoT devices, our data-only devices, and our voice and data devices, we are getting a very fair in-market offer from Rogers. So that's my 2 cents. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bauer?
Thank you, Chair. Thank you, Regional Councillor Lee, for those comments. Good afternoon, Mr. Walker. So I just want to understand the fee that we're paying for this contract. That includes the package on the plan on the devices and the devices themselves. And then does it also include like the warranty? And then I think we get the offer to upgrade our devices every so often. What's included in this fee?
Yep, through the chair to Councillor Bauer. So it's similar to what you'd get if you're going to go personally, just much cheaper because of the bulk items. So you would buy, in our case, we do have a discounted price on the device. So there's like a capital cost of those devices. Obviously, the newer iPhone does cost more than the older one, that type of thing. And then once you sign, like as an individual yourself, we give you that phone, you'd be on that contract at that reduced, that monthly rate, which is again only about, I don't know if I mentioned this, but it's only about $15 a month for unlimited voice and data now, which is just really cheap.
Yeah.
And that's right. So there'd be the warranty. If something were to break, we could send it and Rogers will replace it under that warranty. And then when the contract is up, we would either you'd stick with it or we'd get you a new one. So staff every 4 years, we tend to replace it. And council, I think we've done it every 2 years.
Right.
But yeah, does that answer your question?
It does,
Yeah,
thank you. I
yeah.
was just curious.
Yeah,
what
it's basically a full service offering, just, and then the new contract here, just the bonus is they are offering like recycled devices too, so a bit of help there. So some newer devices that maybe didn't work out for someone else, we can get a discounted price as well, which wasn't offered to us before. So
Excellent. Okay, thank you very much. That was my only question.
Thank you. Is there anything further? So I need a mover, please, to support the recommendation on 4. Okay. Councillor Henry. Thank you. So I think you're done. Are we done? Am I missing? Did we do 4.9? Lost track. 4.9 on the contract award. Mayor Collier.
Through you, Madam Chair, we're just meeting on 1 vote still.
Sir, oh, I'm sorry. So we're good? 4.9, Mayor Collier?
Thank you, Chair. I'm not sure what happened, but between reading the agenda and today, somehow my notes are not here. So
So
I'm not
internet,
sure what. Yeah, I'm not sure what my question was. I guess the original question that I recall was, are they providing any hardware, or is the $252,458 just strictly internet, just fiber costs?
yeah, through the chair. So there is, again, I liken this to just I think it's easier for people to relate if they let's look at their home internet. So they do provide certain hardware to make these things connect to each other. So there is the fiber costs, but we do have certain devices, within the facilities that are provided by, in this case, Rogers, to make sure, routers, those type of things, to make sure things work. So this is an all-in cost for the town's internet at all our facilities and the interconnectivity between the facilities.
Okay, all right, thank you. Just wanted to clarify.
Thank you. Counselor Bauer, you had a question?
Thank you, Chair Dies. So in the previous report about Microsoft licenses, it talked about the town through the region saves about 20% had we gone out on our own. So is this something that like all of Durham region needs internet, right? So is this something that could also work on a bulk pricing structure?
Through the chair to Councillor Bauer, that's a great question, and we asked that same question, and currently there is not.
Okay.
We call it a VOR, or there is not that right now. So this was done through ourselves, and again, we currently have Rogers, so it's kind of a continuation / upgrade of what we currently have, but there was not that type of agreement right now. But it's a good suggestion.
Yeah, right?
Yeah.
Let's call Rogers.
Yeah,
Okay,
yeah.
thank you very much. That was my only question.
Anything further? Thank you, Mr. Walker. Appreciate the information. So I do need a mover for the motion to support this recommendation. I'm going to go Regional Councillor Crawford. You're all covered now. Thank you. So that's it for the consent agenda, and we're going to move on to, I'm sorry, we are voting, yes. And we'll move on to the next section, which is presentations. So that's carried. Thank you. So we have 6.1 for presentation regarding school tours program.
Through the chair to council, thanks so much for having me here. I'm Sam Patterson, Government Relations Coordinator. I'm also joined by my colleagues, Ashley Adams, Administrative Assistant to Council, and Jennifer Larmond, Administrative Assistant to the Mayor, who helped design the program that I'm here to talk about today. So can everybody see the presentation? Thank you. Oh, I have to do something? It's on my screen. Okay, I'm back. Thank you. So today I'm here to talk about our school tours program. The school tours program is focused on connecting with grade 5 Ajax students. Grade 5 is when, under the Ontario Social Studies curriculum, students learn about the different levels of government in Canada. That includes municipal government, and they get a better understanding of their civic responsibility as residents. For the town, it gives us an opportunity to get kids excited about their local government, reveal some of the programs and services that we offer as a town, and it meets a promise that's made under Action 26, the strategic plan to encourage community pride. So what will we learn? What does a day or a tour look like for the students? It comes in two parts: a formal presentation in council chambers that is given by a member of council, likely the mayor or deputy mayor, but any member of council can give students a tour, and a tour of the chambers and the council and mayor's office. During the formal presentation, staff have designed a fun and interactive program where we give an overview of items like what is civic responsibility, what is municipal government, looking at the upper tier Durham region, municipal services, bylaws. We also take a look at Town of Ajax history, just briefly looking at DIL, where the town got our name, utilizing a fabulous video that was created by our Heritage Committee, and an intro into our first mayor and council, including Mayor Pat Bailey and his role at Camp X, the World War II spy camp. Then we go on to today's council and the election process. The presentation ends with a reminder of how students can get involved with the town today. We then launch into a game that asks the students to show what they've learned about municipal services. So if you look at the presentation right now, you'll see some of the opportunities for students to get involved, encouraging adults in their life to vote, pursuing a career in municipal government, volunteering for one of our many town festivals or events, becoming a member of the town's youth advisory committee, attending our public meetings, such as this one today, and participating in town programs like Chief for a Day and Regional Chair for a Day. Following the presentation, we thank the council member for their participation and take a photo with the mayor or councillor and students. And from there, we launch into a scripted tour led by PSA staff, including my colleagues here behind me. This tour includes a review of the council photo wall, a bit of a look and find challenge, an opportunity to learn about the HMS Bell that sits behind Regional Councillor Crawford right now, and how it's incorporated into meetings today, as well as a review on how council meetings run. We give classes an opportunity to review the archive display in the corridor on our way to the mayor's office. And once in the mayor's office, we talk about the role of the mayor, highlight the memorabilia there on the walls, shovels from groundbreaking, photos from inauguration night, and paintings of the HMS Ajax. We've already had a teacher reach out and ask us to bring a class to Town Hall. Now, once we've launched our program, which we expect to do so shortly, hopefully with your approval to do so, we will launch with letters from Mayor Collier to all the schools and principals in Ajax, as well as the boards, inviting teachers and their grade 5 classes to participate in the program. The letter will bring them to an online form where they can share their preferred dates, the number of students that will attend, and accessibility needs. We're also going to promote the program on our social channels and inside Ajax News. As part of the promotion, we also plan to drop off Snapshots books, which is a look at the town history to all schools. And we won't be sending kids empty-handed. Their minds will be full, but so are their hands. We're going to have this fantastic activity handout, a really beautiful book that's been created by our design team that talks about what we learned during the tour, but also has some really fun interactive pieces to it where kids can get involved and stretch their muscle on municipal government. So that is the program. I welcome any questions that you might have. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Pedersen. Regional Councillor Crawford?
I cannot like this more. Love, 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 love this program. I think it's great. The earlier we can get into the minds of kids, the better, children. And I guess I'm wondering, like, when you're talking about civic duties and garbage and that, will you be attaching a dollar figure to what it costs the town to pick up garbage that's on the ground?
Through the chair to Regional Councillor Crawford, at this time, dollar figures aren't contemplated as part of the presentation, but we do highlight where these things happen, at which level of government, and help give a better understanding, because I think that's where a lot of young kids are confused as to what lies at what level of government. But it's very tweakable and tweakable to whoever is giving that presentation of the day. Whichever member of council can also bring their own flair to the presentation. So if your flair includes dollar figures, I can certainly help make that happen.
My flair includes composting. But one other thing I was thinking about, I've thought about this for a while and I don't even know if it's doable. I think actually one of the northern municipalities does this. When I was on the school board, we used to have student trustees. And I thought it would be really cool if we could actually start to introduce that kind of concept to council, where you have a student counselor. I don't know if that's even doable, but I thought it would be an interesting concept to really get kids involved. They wouldn't be paid. It would be like a very small honorarium, but I thought it would be good to get people's students' interest. And of course, it would be higher than grade 5. It would be like, grade 9, grade 10, whatever. Anyway, it's just a thought and just throwing it out there. I'm sure there's varying opinions on what that is, but that's just my thinking, because we really have to get the younger generation involved in government. They're going to be voting. And so they need to get involved in it. They need to understand what it's like to be a councillor and all the things that we have to deal with. Anywho, that's it.
Thank you. Councillor Bauer?
Thank you, Chair Dice. Thank you, Ms. Patterson. Excellent presentation. I love this program. I think it sounds so wonderful, and I think the kids and families, if parents join in, will find it very, very informative. I especially love the council picture where we are sitting on invisible chairs. My question is, have you anticipated, or how long of a day? Is this like a full day trip, or how would that work?
Through the chair to Councillor Bauer. So right now we anticipate that the tour is about 45 minutes long. We have spoken with our colleagues at Ajax Library, who also offer their own school tours program, to see if it might be desirable to offer that you do the town hall tour with our team, and then move on to talk about archives and what it is that the Ajax Library is doing, if that makes it a more fulsome day. There certainly are schools within walking distance that we anticipate that 45-minute timeline will be wonderful, and lots of others that we hope will take advantage, take a bus, and come visit us here at Town Hall.
Yeah, no, I think it's great. I hope that the schools take you up on it, because I think it's wonderful. And then just, could this be tweaked? Does the town do a take your kid to work day?
Yes, funnily enough, we just celebrated Take Your Kid to Work Day with grade 9 students last week, and had, I'm not sure how many students through Town Hall, but quite a number. And certainly this could be something that we offer on that day as well, to give that information.
Yeah, okay. Thanks, great. Thank you very much. Those were my questions.
Thank you. Councillor Henry?
Thank you. Great presentation. Thank you. I too love the picture. I want to know where my legs are, but I do love the picture. It's a great picture. So this is going to look like, let's say that a councillor is unavailable or the mayor is unavailable. Who is going to be doing these presentations if council's not available?
Through the chair to Councillor Henry, we will be working with our council and mayor administrators to find a day that will work with at least one member of council, so that we can have that presentation come directly from you, our local experts in municipal government and mayor and council.
And will there be a staff accompanying during this?
Yes, 100%. So there will always be a member of our PSA team who then takes over once you've wrapped up the formal presentation and PowerPoint here in council chambers. Staff will then take over the rest of the tour.
Okay, so this is where my true question comes in. Knowing that, for those folks at home who don't know, we are 6 counselors with 1 assistant. Whitby's got 3 assistants, Pickering's got 3 assistants, we've got 1. And we use our assistant quite often. And I want to know what this will look like if we start getting busy, because I suspect we will. When I was parent chair, through my daughter's school, this was something that was very much sought out and not offered at the time. So it's a great program. I feel you're going to be overly busy than what you think you're going to be. What's going to happen? Because I don't want to put any more pressure on the staff from our office. I feel, in fact, we need another staff person. So what's going to happen there?
So right now, we're only offering the program to grade 5 classes. So that is the stipulation. It must be a grade 5 classroom. We're inviting you to come once throughout the school year. So if every single grade 5 classroom does come, then yes, I anticipate throughout the school year we'll be busy, but we're not looking to do them all at once. We might contemplate doing a couple classes at the same time to try to alleviate if there's a heavy demand, but I don't anticipate that it will be beyond the capacity that we can offer right now.
Okay, and if it does, then I guess we're gonna have other discussions then at that time. I like the mention of the booklet that you've put together. To Councillor Crawford's point, could there be additional material in there? She's already mentioned the litter piece, which we really need to start young people focusing on. Safety for roads, bikes, things like that, that used to be like back in the day in Toronto, you know, Elmer, the safety elephant, whatever, would come into the school and talk about. We don't have those type of things necessarily anymore. So will those type of little things go into this package, or could they be put in there?
So right now we have a printed book and are limited with adding anything more. I mean, we could print additional pages if that becomes a desire at some point. This program can also be tweaked if we discover in our first year of operating that there's more information that we want to have part as maybe the council presentation, that might be an easier place to add additional information. But right now there certainly is a focus during that formal presentation on what are the services that are provided and how we can be good residents. And so all of those points that you bring up are really wonderful points to mention as how we can be excellent Ajax citizens, excellent Ajax residents.
Excellent. And have we, my final question is, have we reached out to Durham Regional Police and or Fire? Because I know that whenever we do events, they always have a table. They always have little information pieces for kids that are actually quite relevant. So I'm wondering if we've asked that of those services to see if they want to include something in this information piece.
At this time, that's not been part of the focus of the program. We're strictly focusing on municipal government and utilizing that as part of our program. So we're only scheduling what we can accomplish and not worrying about external services and stakeholders at this time.
Okay, thank you. I like the way you say this time. I like, thank you.
Councillor Crawford. Hang
Lovely
on.
way of saying no. With a lovely smile on her face. My question is, will each of these children be going home with an Ajax book or a book dedicated to the library? Our history book.
Through the chair to Regional Councillor Crawford, every child will go home with the activity handout, and before the end of the year, it is our plan to bring the Ajax Snapshots book to each school in Ajax so that they can have that as part of their library collection, and hopefully that can become part of their broader learning about municipal services.
Excellent, thank you.
Is there anything further? I have one question. So thank you for bringing this back again, and I say that because we've done this previously in the past, and it was very, very successful, and the ward councillors were welcome to come if it was a school within their ward. But I'm curious to know if at that time we also provided a resource binder for teachers, because through the civics in grade 5, those classes, they have a lot of time to talk about other things as well. So that was provided in the past. I know Carruthers was one of the schools that took one, so that the teacher can just reach for that and have something already planned to teach about Ajax. So do we know if they're still using that, or do we have any intention of going back to that maybe in the future?
To the chair, at this time, no, we're not contemplating a binder that we hand out. I will say that the Ontario curriculum does have really excellent resources, and that's where we pulled a lot of our direction from when looking at the design of this program. What is the information that students are learning in class and is part of the curriculum, and how can we pull that into a way that makes sense to them in their lives today here in Ajax, and display that to them. This is how it plays out in real life. So that's the direction that we've gone with at this time, but I'm sure we'd be happy to, also, I should share that in our activity handbook, there is an activity that classes can do together to design your own neighborhood. I think we know and love our town planners very well, and so we ask for the students to maybe put on their planner hats and take a look at their neighborhoods as well, and what's needed, a mailbox, houses, where are there sidewalks, where are there traffic lights. So we ask kids to think about what their neighborhood would look like. And again, that's pulled right from the Ontario curriculum, asking them to take on that activity.
I believe, though, there was also in that curriculum a part about community and history, that historical reference. How did Ajax get established? I mean, it goes way back to the history of the village and DIL. So I bring that up because that's an important part of having a strong sense of community and having pride in your community when people understand the history of where they're living. So it's something hopefully you'll consider in the future, because I think it was very much successful. All right. Anyway, anything further, anybody? Okay. Thank you very much for your
Thank you.
presentation. And we'll call the vote on that, please, in support of that.
Through you, Madam Chair, can we have
Or
a
the
mover for that?
recommendation. Yeah. Okay, thank you. So we're going down to 6.2, the Sustainable Green Fleet
Through you, Madam
Strategy.
Chair, we just have to complete the vote.
Oh, I thought you'd already come and gone. Okay, thanks. I'm
We're just
rushing
waiting
you.
on one.
Not rushing you, really. Yes. Did it come up? I didn't see it come up yet. Okay. All right. Ready to go, Mr. Glue?
Yes, good afternoon, everyone. Good afternoon, Mayor, council members, senior management, and all those in attendance. My name is Scott Glue. I'm the manager of Fleet Services. I'd like to thank you for allowing us to present the Sustainable Green Fleet Strategy here this afternoon. I've been working with members, consulting team from AECOM for about the last year or so. At this time, I'd like to introduce Stuart Hamray. Sorry. Hey, Stuart. Stuart's going to walk us through the presentation and lead us through the discussion afterwards, and we'll be happy to answer any questions at that time. Thank you.
Thanks, Scott, and thanks, Mayor and Council, for having us here today. I'm just going to take a quick 10 minutes to walk everyone through the proposal for a fleet transition plan, which we're calling the Sustainable Green Fleet Strategy that, as Scott mentioned, we've been working through with the town and staff for the past year or so. So just quickly on the background that kind of precipitated this work, obviously the fleet operations and what the vehicles that the town operates are impacting the environment through the generation of GHG emissions. And as a result of that, and in preparation for this study, the town's been implementing a variety of sustainable fleet practices for about 15 years or so. We also know that there's an emissions target to reduce town's emissions by about 40% by 2030 and 100% by 2050 below 2019 baseline levels. So that has precipitated this Sustainable Green Fleet Strategy, which is going to guide those decarbonization efforts. So of course that 40% emissions reduction target is from all sources. So we're looking at what fleet can do to be a part of that emissions reduction. In terms of what we looked at over the past year, we're building on some of those early fleet and equipment electrification efforts that Scott's team's been kind of underway with, and developing a high-level strategy for the transition to zero-emission vehicles, primarily electric vehicles, as well as looking at some of the anticipated cost and replacement timelines for those vehicles and some off-road assets as well. This plan is preceding any of the detailed design work for all the charging stations that are going to need to go in to support those vehicles, as well as the selection of individual models to replace the vehicles you've got today. And on the right side of the screen, you see a current low-emission town vehicle and some of the charging equipment that's in place at the operations center, which is the same stuff you've got installed outside of council chambers today. So we looked at two scenarios, and there was a scenario development process that's illustrated here. So the first and most important thing was to understand the current fleet operations, so how the vehicles are used day to day. Next, we looked at forecasting a replacement schedule based on the current operations and how long you retain your vehicles, usually about 7 to 10 years. Then we identified where there are like-for-like electric vehicle replacements for the current fleet, considering also the duty cycle, so the day-to-day routine of each of the vehicles, that sort of thing. And then we developed a handful of transition scenarios and replacement schedules depending on those scenarios, as well as associated emissions, infrastructure requirements, and cost for each of those transition scenarios. The two scenarios that we'll talk about today are the cost optimized scenario and the technology leadership scenario. So these are two kind of theoretical paths forward. For the cost optimized scenario, we looked at replacing existing vehicles with electric vehicles only when it's more cost effective to operate an EV than an existing internal combustion engine vehicle. So that's your lowest cost transition scenario. And then on the technology leadership scenario side, we looked at replacing vehicles with EVs whenever they're available for replacement and potentially considering some early retirements. And the aim of that scenario is to illustrate the quickest pathway to the lowest greenhouse gas emissions scenario. So on one hand, we've got the low cost, and then on the other hand, we've got the low emissions scenario. Just quickly in terms of what the fleet utilization looks like today, there's about 126 on-road vehicles and 92 powered off-road assets in the fleet. There's additional unlicensed assets as well, and the average age is about 10 years for the existing fleet. Tons of vehicles on the passenger and light commercial side, and then we've got some SUVs, heavy commercial, and off-road vehicles. In terms of today's emissions, we looked at the fuel card data provided by the town. And so the on-road fleet and off-road fleet generate about 822 tons of CO2 emissions a year. That excludes the rental fleet and contractor vehicles. If those are added in, it's about 1,000 tons of CO2 emissions per year from the fleet. That's dropped a little bit over the past few years, but it does still remain around that tonnage. Light commercial vehicles make up the largest segment of the emissions, so about half of the emissions come from your light commercial vehicles, things like Ford F-150s in the fleet. Also, electrification of some of those vehicles is already in progress, so Scott's been procuring EVs and electric equipment where it meets operational needs for the town, so some of the emissions are starting to fall already. Some of those also include an electric Zamboni. I think there's another one on order, zero-turn motors, and some plug-in hybrid vehicles also being procured. So just in terms now of the kind of modeling results for those two scenarios that I had mentioned, this shows the on-road fleet composition for both of these scenarios. So on the left, we have the cost optimized scenario. So this is looking at the composition of the full fleet over the next 15 years from 2024 until 2039, which was the timeframe of the study. So the brown kind of segment is the internal combustion engine vehicles, and you can see that they're reducing over time, although in the cost optimized scenario, we still retain a few of those vehicles in the fleet 10 or 15 years from now. The kind of big light green segment is your battery electric fleet vehicles, and you can see that that's growing fairly steadily to represent just over half the fleet, sort of around the 2030, 2035 mark. On the right-hand side, on the technology leadership scenario, you'll see that almost all of the on-road vehicles are replaced with battery electric vehicles by 2039. Probably a few internal combustion engine heavy-duty vehicles and off-road vehicles will remain in the fleet at that time, but it's a bit more aggressive in terms of the transition timeline, and so that's reflected there. In terms of the other two colors in the graphics there, there's some hybrid vehicles and plug-in hybrids as well that continue to be used in the fleet. In terms of what this is going to mean in terms of your charging infrastructure needs, based on both of the scenarios, about 80 to 100 charging ports are going to be needed. Most of those will be at the operations center. The assumption is that most of the vehicles will charge overnight. So you've got about 8 to 10 hours to charge the vehicles. And with that in mind, it's likely that level 1 and level 2 charging stations are going to be needed for the most part. We've modeled the level 2 needs, and that's reflected in the cost estimate that I'll present in a moment. There's already some level 1 charging equipment within the operations center behind the fence. And then, of course, there's some of the level 2 charge point chargers available as well for public use at the operations center, as well as outside here. Further, some level 3 DC fast charging is probably going to be required for the high mileage vehicles and for first responder vehicles. They've got quick turnaround times needed, so to get them back on the road after the battery's been depleted, that faster charging is going to be needed. We haven't modeled that equipment, but that would be something to look for in the future. In terms of the emissions results for both of these scenarios, you can see on the left that in red is illustrated council's target, and then we've just highlighted 2030 there, so that's where we're trying to achieve that 40% emissions reduction target from the 2019 baseline. You can see that we don't quite clear that target with the full cost optimized scenario, but we do with the technology leadership scenario. So a fairly aggressive transition is going to be needed to meet that 2030 emissions reduction target, and we do get there with the assumptions built into the technology leadership scenario. We almost get there with the cost optimized scenario. This just provides a little more detail on what that breakdown looks like. So for the assumptions in the technology leadership scenario between 29 and 2030, we hit that emissions reduction target. For the cost optimized scenario, it's between 2030 and 2031, so about a year shy of target, or a year over target. Here's just a breakdown of the cost by scenario. So in gray on the left-hand side, you'll see the business as usual costs for operating the fleet over the next 15 years, about $31.5 million. Under a cost optimized scenario, you're projected to save about $600,000 or $700,000 over that 15-year span. The technology leadership scenario is a bit more expensive, about $5 million more expensive than business as usual, but it does come with that emission savings benefit rather. On the right side of the screen, you'll see the fleet capital costs are taking up most of the portion of that budget. A bit of money saved on the fleet residual value. That's where you auction off the vehicles at the end of their service life and get some of that money back. And then a bit of money for charging infrastructure, maintenance, fuel, electricity, and taxes. So finally, just on the summary and recommended path forward to try and get to that 40% emissions reduction target, there's a fair bit of flexibility in how we can achieve the emissions reduction goals. There's lots of different types of fleet vehicles. In both of the scenarios, we're switching the on-road vehicles to EVs, and that's helping achieve a really significant emissions reduction. But we'll also need to be fairly aggressive with the off-road and unlicensed equipment, transitioning that to get to that emissions reduction target. So we'd recommend doing that on off-road and unlicensed equipment transition more in line with the technology leadership scenario to get to that 40% target, whereas the on-road vehicles could potentially be transitioned a little bit more slowly in line with a cost optimized scenario and still get you to that emission saving, but save a little bit of money. So this is just a bit more detail on the recommendations. So I mentioned early on that about half the town's fleet emissions come from your light commercial vehicles. So that's your pickup trucks and cargo vans. There's not as many EV models that exist to fit those needs today. There's a handful of electric pickup trucks on the market, but Scott's team is operating vehicles with heavy payloads. They're towing things, and there's not as many EV models that exist to meet those needs. So we'd recommend electrifying those vehicles a little bit more slowly, more in line with a cost-optimized scenario. Then about 20% of the emissions is from your off-road and unlicensed equipment. A lot of that is things like mowers and tractors. Those are already being electrified by the fleet services team, so those can probably be electrified a bit more quickly, more in keeping with the assumptions in the technology leadership scenario, to be a bit more aggressive about emissions reduction. And we know that some of those pieces of equipment are already meeting the operational needs of fleet services. Third, we've got about 5% of the town's fleet emissions that are coming from light passenger vehicles. There's already a number of plug-in hybrid vehicles in the fleet today, which could operate in electric-only mode most of the time. That's not currently the case, so a lot of the vehicles aren't being used in electric mode. So if we're a little more careful about how some of those vehicles are used, it's likely that that 5% emissions could be reduced fairly significantly. So in summary, with a kind of gradual electrification of that light commercial fleet, and then an aggressive electrification of the off-road and unlicensed equipment where it makes sense, together with leveraging the existing plug-in hybrids, we expect that you could achieve the 40% emissions reduction target that Town Council has set for 2030. Last point, and an important one, is that before the electrification of the vehicles takes place, of course, there's a lot of infrastructure that's going to need to be installed to enable charging. final point here is just some considerations moving forward. So we'd recommend a yard utilization study, and that's something that we've talked with Scott and the team about to just determine where some of that charging infrastructure can be accommodated at the operations center without impacting your ability to deliver services. We've done some early kind of coordination with the Lexicon, but we'd recommend taking that to the next step and making sure that some of that near-term charging demand can be met, and as well planning for the new fast charging connections that are going to be required. Deployment of infrastructure and the proper phasing of that is going to be very important for the successful deployment of your EVs. Of course, when an EV arrives in the fleet, you want to make sure that the charger's there and ready to support that vehicle. And whatever findings come forth from that proposed yard utilization study will help inform that. And lastly, we just want to make sure that the town keeps some kind of abreast of new technologies and continues monitoring emerging technologies, particularly on the medium and heavy duty equipment side. There's not a whole lot of technologies out there to support that segment of the market, but we expect that to change around 2030. So that'll be important, and fast charging is probably going to be very important for those fleet vehicles. So thanks, I'll stop there and I'll take questions.
Thank you. So at the report, you were saying for the bulk of our electrical vehicles, we're relying on level 1 chargers?
Through the chair to Councillor Lee, level 1 and level 2 chargers. So level 1 chargers are what's in the ground today.
120 volt, right?
That's right. And then primarily level 2 chargers will be needed moving forward. The level 1s are probably suitable for your plug-in hybrids that you've already got in the fleet today.
Right.
Moving forward, level 2 will be the primary charger type.
Currently, how are we charging our vehicles? So like, do we use the infrastructure that ChargePoint has set up, and then do we pay ChargePoint prices to charge them?
Yeah, I think I'll defer to Scott on that one.
Through the chair to Councillor Lee, we've just recently got our RFID cards to charge out here. It is free to the town vehicles. We are using the town's electricity, so again, it's built into that, so we will be using those to be deployed any day now. I just programmed them actually yesterday, and we're ready to move forward with it. Thank you.
But up to that point, how are we charging our vehicles? Because you said we just got the RFIDs now. So before that, how were we charging whatever electrical vehicles we did have?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Lee. Unfortunately, they weren't being charged. You can see them parked outside on a regular basis. So once we've kind of moved through that process, we quickly obtain the RFID cards and move forward with that.
Okay, that's not a great answer, because realistically, it just means we've just started now, when, you know, like, this was a council directive a few years ago. Like, I just, you know, I made the incorrect assumption that we had infrastructure at our various facilities that could facilitate charging, but we have not had that up until, or we have, but we haven't been using it up until, I guess, tomorrow, we'll call it.
Through the chair to Councillor Lee, that's correct.
Okay. So we have a 2025 target. Sorry, please. Yeah.
Through the chair to Regional Councillor Lee, I just want to be sort of clear with respect to the charging stations that you're referencing. Where we've installed them primarily at ACC, MCC, Audley Recreation Center, and Town Hall, when they were installed, the primary intent was not for it to be town fleet. It was for it to be public, it was to be for public access. So we've had discussions, recent discussions at senior management, saying how we could better utilize them to support our fleet, and the fact that we're not utilizing it and the public aren't charging overnight necessarily. So there's a change in practice. We're moving forward in terms of trying to sort of receive that benefit. But I just wanted to be clear, sort of in the response, the intent was, when we installed those, was for public use and not for town fleet. So that's been a recent change.
But I guess when we made the shift, the town, to start buying more PHEVs and EVs, I just assumed we would be plugging them in hockey, whatever, like wherever we had plugs available. And so it's just like, I guess that was an incorrect assumption on my part.
And that's where the infrastructure has lagged, and the investment needs to be made in the infrastructure for us to take advantage of the investments we've made in those fleet vehicles.
Okay. I mean, obviously, I think the mayor's still on the line. The budget's coming up. I truly hope we have the infrastructure in place to utilize. Otherwise, all our vehicles can be EVs, but they just be somewhat useless, especially level 1. I have a pretty small EV and it takes me 18 hours for a full charge on a level 1. You know, like that's not feasible for a municipality to run its 200 plus vehicles that we have. So, yeah, alarming to find out, disappointing. You know, like I just want to remind council, we did make green commitments and things are getting worse and hotter as we are knowing. So I think come budget time, we are going to have to make some hard decisions in terms of the infrastructure costs on top of this green fleet strategy. Because without the infrastructure costs, we could greenify our entire fleet. They're not going anywhere. Thank you, Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Henry?
Thank you. Sorry, I'm confused. Are you saying that, through the chair, are you saying that we have vehicles that have not been used because they couldn't be charged? Or are you saying we just haven't been utilizing the public charging?
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Henry. So there are some plug-in hybrid vehicles in the fleet that have both a gasoline engine and a battery pack. They can be used in like gasoline-only mode. I think that's primarily how they've been used to
So they
date.
haven't been sitting there. They've been used, but they've been not used as was intended.
To their full extent, that's right. So they're basically being used as a typical
Because
gas
we
car.
had no infrastructure at town facilities for fleet vehicles. Is that correct?
Yeah, that's behind the fence infrastructure that's not accessible to the public where those vehicles can
And how long have we had these vehicles?
Through the chair to Councillor Henry, since 2016, 2017.
What the? So we would have paid a premium for these vehicles because they're hybrid, but yet we did not utilize the potential of them this entire time? How is that possible? That no infrastructure has been put in place this entire time?
Through the chair to Councillor Henry, the infrastructure was there. Operationally, they were not plugged in.
Okay, I'm going to move on to my other question. My next question would be, if it's a totally electronic vehicle, my understanding is that if we let the battery drain down, then the battery becomes, the vehicle then runs out of warranty. So part of the warranty, my understanding was, if you have an electric vehicle, there's a certain manufacturer's warranty. My husband works in warranty, that's why I'm asking this question. And he said to me, he made a comment one day, and he said, do you realize that with an electric vehicle, certain electric vehicles, that if you're not charging it all the time, if it runs down, he said, we just had a vehicle come in that we were reselling. He said that it wasn't charged by our company. Our employees used it, did not charge it. Therefore, the manufacturer's warranty was void. And the battery to replace it is like $30,000. So I guess to Councillor Lee's point, if we don't have the infrastructure for this, for the charging of these vehicles that we're going to buy, where does that put us in the future? And maybe this is not a question for you folks, but maybe you folks on this side, is do we have the infrastructure in the budget do we have infrastructure in the budget that will support the fleet that we are purchasing? Can someone over on that side answer that for me?
So a couple of things. First of all, with respect to the plug-in vehicles, to sort of set the context, you know, in terms of us not utilizing the vehicles in their electric mode. In the entire fleet, there's 6 plug-in vehicles. So when you look at it is not saying it's right, but just to put in context, it's not.
It's not great.
It's not a large percentage of our overall fleet. With respect to some of our more traditional hybrids that aren't plug-in, that don't necessarily require the plug-in requirements, it's in terms of how they function and operate and recharge as they are running and operating. So the real opportunities for the electrical benefit was for the 6 plug-in vehicles that we have not taken advantage of over recent years. With respect to the question and infrastructure, that we are building into our capital budget, and there are also funding applications that we are pursuing as it relates to that. And I believe we have a current application for 20 level 2 charging stations that we have that's in consideration that, you know, if we receive the funding for, then that will be implemented in the 2025 season. So there are opportunities for additional funding requirements, or sort of funding opportunities that we are leveraging and looking to as well.
So let me ask this. If we are, let's say it's taken out of the budget and we don't have the infrastructure in the budget, are we still going to go forward and purchase these vehicles knowing we don't have the infrastructure?
Charge points.
Yeah, but how many of them?
Yes is the answer. We can charge them now.
Mr. Meredith.
So the answer is we will be getting more charging stations to support the investment in the plug-in hybrid or electric vehicles that we'll be acquiring. We'll make sure there is, as you go through the strategy, we've had discussions, and has the presentation alluded to, is there needs to be coordination with that investment in infrastructure. Through this process, we've been involved on the facility side of things. We've been involved in conversations with Alexicon to ensure that the capacity exists within each of our facilities to accommodate the EV charging level 2 infrastructure requirements. We will be providing and we will be installing them in a coordinated way. We're not going to be making the investment in plug-in hybrids and electric vehicles without the infrastructure in place. So the capital program reflects that coordination.
So when we're looking at something like this morning, when we did the announcement this morning with the province at ACC, and we have those type of charging stations there, if we wanted to bring forth one of our vehicles, our town vehicles, and have it plugged in there, it would be paid for through the card that you mentioned a minute ago, is that correct? But that would mean, how long does it take to charge a vehicle at that station?
Through the chair to Councillor Henry, 6 to 8 hours, depending on what the vehicle is.
So if we were to be leaving vehicles overnight, that means we would have to leave a vehicle, if we didn't, like, I guess what I'm getting at is, we had to leave a vehicles overnight in unsecure parking lots around the town facilities to charge them. That's not really the best, most secure thing for a vehicle of that expense to be left out. Whereas up at operations, I get it, there's a fence and it's behind the fence and it's a secure lot. When you're talking about leaving at different town recreation centers overnight, I'm not so secure with that. I don't know about the rest of council, but that gives me cause for concern. So I'm just gonna leave that there for now and follow up off camera with further questions on this. Thank you.
Okay.
Thank you. Regional Councillor Crawford?
Thank you. Thank you for your presentation. As chair of transit, we had tried to get zero admission funding from the federal government, and were denied that funding. And because of that, we've had to slow down significantly the purchase of electric buses for our fleet. Have we looked at is there any grants available at all through the different levels of government? I mean, electrification, yes, we all know is the best way to go. It is, it's really been mandated by the federal government, and I'm just wondering, is there any grant opportunities for us to help to purchase these vehicles? I don't know about trucks, but I know that with buses, they are literally double the cost of a diesel bus.
Yeah, through the chair to Councillor Crawford, thanks for the question. I know that the town has been looking into the Zero Emission Vehicle Infrastructure Fund, which I believe is funding the chargers that are being installed near Town Hall. That's for the infrastructure. For the vehicles themselves, there has been funding available from the federal government for transit agencies. The Zero Emission Transit Fund is now fully subscribed, so there's no more funding available. It's likely that more funding opportunities will come available in the future, but at this time, I don't think there are any capital funding opportunities available from the federal or provincial governments to support this sort of program.
Is the deal that it'll be, that we'll all be electrified by 2030? Is that still the goal? Oh, 2050 now?
Yeah, so the goal is, from the federal perspective, the goal is for all light commercial vehicles to be, passenger vehicles to be electric from 2035 onwards.
Okay.
So just through the chair to Councillor Crawford, further incentives from NRCan are out there. So for heavy-duty vehicles, it's anywhere from $40,000 to $200,000 worth of rebates or incentives when you actually purchase the vehicle. Leasing reduces that incentive over time. For the light-duty vehicles, such as vans that we would use for building services, is about $10,000. The recent PHEVs that we purchased were $5,000.
So, sorry, so just if you're to purchase let's say a truck, what would let's say a diesel truck cost versus an electric truck? Just so we understand the cost difference.
That's a great question. So if I say it's a diesel 4x4 pickup truck crew cab, it's around $75,000 to $80,000. For the new Lightning, or sorry, I'm getting into makes and models here, or the Silverado, it's around the $90,000 to $95,000, potentially $100,000, with $2,500 to $5,000 off of those vehicles for the NRCan incentive. There's no provincial incentive on top of that.
Okay, all right, thank you very much. Thank you, Madam Chair.
Thank you. Councillor Bauer?
Thank you, Chair. Dias, good afternoon. Thank you for the report and the presentation. So on slide, I was surprised to hear that data as well, that the 6 vehicles that we have that could be greenly used are not. But the slide 15, where it's the fleet profile utilization, and then it provides all of the vehicles and I guess non-vehicles. So I just want to confirm, so out of the 126 on-road vehicles, currently we have 6 that we have not been charging, but we are using powered by gas. Is that right?
Through the chair to Councilwoman Bauer, yes, I believe that's correct, that there are 6 plug-in hybrid electric vehicles that could be used in that kind of combined gasoline electric mode that are currently only being used in gasoline mode. So that's one of the kind of points in undertaking this study, is to identify some of those quick wins.
Yeah. So starting tomorrow, there will be 0 green cars that won't be used in a green way, correct?
If I could sort of respond, it seems simple, but so if we look, for example, that there's 4 plug-in vehicles here at Town Hall.
Yes.
We have the ability to plug in 4 vehicles at Town Hall.
Right.
There is, and we've looked at the data, the benefit of residents that are using those plug-in stations after hours.
Yeah.
So from a town perspective, the direction that we're providing is to have 2 of those vehicles plugged in so that 2 of them are left available for the public. So again, I don't want to sort of misrepresent sort of what I'm saying and sort of what the expectations are, but we've had discussions primarily with, and it'll primarily be in planning and development, and had the discussion with Jeff as it relates to a couple of building inspector vehicles that will be able to utilize the charging infrastructure overnight here at Town Hall. But we will be keeping 2 available for public use. So we've got the data that we've analyzed. It's used more frequently, obviously, when the memorial pool's open in the evening, but up until 9, 10 o'clock at night, there is usage of that, of those public spaces.
Sure.
So there's that transition time from when staff complete their shift at 4:30 and that gap that we would need to keep available for the public. So I wouldn't say there's a full utilization of those 6 vehicles, because the majority of them are here at Town Hall and there's limited capacity.
Okay. All right. Thank you for that. And then on page, slide number 22, where it's the graph about costs by scenario. So, and I just wanted to say, so 6 out of 126 vehicles is 0.05%. So, and I just want to put ease on my colleagues that I get it. I'm as shocked as you are, but let's remain calm, and we are moving in the right direction. And security-wise, absolutely right. We have vehicles that are left at Town Hall overnight and parked there, and they are secure, and same as our rec centers, so they are secure. So sorry, my question about this slide. Please break that down. What does business as usual mean?
Sure, yeah, through the chair to Councilwoman Bauer. A business as usual scenario just forecasts your business as usual costs were the fleet not to be transitioned to electric vehicles. So it looks at your operations today and then forecasts the replacement of all of your current fleet vehicles with another diesel or gasoline truck for the next 15 years. So all of the costs are associated with the vehicles, fuel costs, maintenance, and the like. And that's why you'll see on the right-hand side of the screen there, the second last column under electricity cost, the BAU scenario does not have any costs assigned there because all of the vehicles would be used, would be just gasoline or diesel. Likewise, there's no costs associated with the charging infrastructure. So that's your baseline against which to compare the two scenarios that we've developed.
Okay. And I'm just thinking of previous budgets where there have been line items to purchase green fleet vehicles. So business as usual would include those vehicles as well. Like we are purchasing those vehicles now, are we not?
Through the chair to Councilwoman Bauer, the business as usual scenario is just a sort of a theoretical scenario.
Got it.
I don't believe it contains those plug-in hybrid vehicles. It just looks at the current makeup of the fleet with that 0.5% of plug-in hybrids.
Okay.
And just forecasts that same replacement cycle for the next 15 years. So there's no new electric vehicle procurements.
Right.
It just takes your existing ones. So they're probably captured in there, but because it's such a small percentage of the fleet and such a small percentage of the emissions, it wouldn't really play out in the future.
Sure, okay. And then between the two scenarios, one meeting the 2030 target and one meeting it a year later is a difference of about 7 million.
Through the chair to Councilwoman Bauer, that's correct. Over the span of 15 years.
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, all right. Okay, thank you very much. Those are my questions.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Boy, you hit a bee's nest with this. So I just want to try and simplify this because it always comes down to the same thing for us councillors. We have to be able to speak to this. We have ward meetings all the time and people are going to say, hey, what happened in that council meeting? They were talking about vehicles. So really quickly on page 15 of the agenda, we have fleet profile utilization. And if you don't punch that up, and we have all these vehicles there. So in regards to the charging stations and, using these hybrid vehicles the right way and us paying, I don't know if it's double, like a $60,000 vehicle that is running like a $35,000 vehicle is pretty unsettling. So out of all these, the off-road unlicensed, none of that applies. Heavy duty commercial, none of that applies, correct? Just going down from right to left. SUVs, so there's 8 SUVs. I have a feeling that you may have answered these questions, but please bear with me. So how many of these are the hybrid electric vehicles, I should say, out of this fleet I see here? 2275, 8, 2192. I can assume none of them are the heavy commercial or off-road unlicensed.
Yes, through the chair to Councillor Tyler Morin. Of the 22, it would be 6 of those.
So out of all these vehicles, the only thing we're talking about is 6 vehicles in total that weren't used properly or efficiently or charged or fueled properly.
To its potential maximum benefit, yes.
Okay. So those 6 vehicles, we still own them, they're still up and running, correct?
Through the chair to Councillor Tyler Morin, correct.
Okay. So if we start, like we were saying, Director Meredith's already answered the question. Okay, so I just wanted to confirm those numbers, so it's a little bit more settling that we're only talking about a total of 6 vehicles. Every other vehicle's up and running and getting their fuel and doing what it's supposed to do. Okay, and did you say at some point Mr. Hammer, did you say that at operations there were charging stations behind the lines or no?
Through the chair to Councillor Tyler Moore, at the operations center, there are a handful of level 1 chargers, which I believe came with the plug-in hybrid vehicles that are just not in use. They need to be installed. That's my recollection from
So they're
the site
not,
visit.
like, I can't take Sterling's car right there now and plug it in and charge it?
You can if you want.
I believe the charger would have to be installed.
So wouldn't it make, oh, it'd have to be installed. So do we have them or we don't have them? Like,
We have the charge.
Yeah, the
we have the
chargers,
chargers, but they're not
the
hooked up?
chargers, the chargers come with the vehicle, but they haven't been installed. Yes, and to my earlier point to the councilwoman, yeah, that's sort of a quick win that we've identified in the report, is using those vehicles to their full potential by taking advantage of that
Yeah, wouldn't we,
existing infrastructure.
sorry, wouldn't we just hook up these things that we already own?
That's-
And they can be charged safely? To Councillor Henry's good point that we don't want them, just in a barren parking lot on a Saturday night.
That's our recommendation, yes.
Cost money to do that, just like some Topscon screws and plug it in and away you go, or, anyways, I'm getting cheeky now. I'll just leave it there, but I just wanted to just go through that fleet so we can understand that really we're talking about 6 vehicles here. Thank you, Chair.
Are there any further questions from council? Thank you, gentlemen, for answering all our difficult questions and
you.
for your report. Appreciate it. So I need a recommendation a motion to approve the recommendation. Okay. Regional Sterling Lee. And a vote, please. Thank you. That's supported. So we're going to move on now to the item 6.3, presentation about the older adult operating model analysis. What do you want? What would you like?
Ian McDeal, oh, sorry, I wasn't on. Was that okay? Ian McDeal from Blackline Consulting, who will walk us through the older adult operating model analysis.
Good afternoon, Council. I'm Ian Shelley. I have Abdul with me. We're going to split the presentation. I'll do the first half and Abdul will close out the second half before questions. So, over the last few months, we've had the opportunity to work with the staff to look at how you deliver services to older adults, particularly around recreation and programming. I'm going to present today briefly our approach and then get into what we found and then what we're recommending the town think about in terms of how it delivers services. We took a four-phased approach. Very much the first phases were engaging with the community and staff on what their experience today is and what they would like to see going forward. Certainly with this cohort in your community, they were fairly open with their views on what they would like to see happening across the various services that we talked about. We took that information back and looked at developing different options for the town in how you delivered services, and we ended up working with staff to look at 5 different approaches to delivering services, almost a spectrum, if you like, from very close to today, from very far away from how it's done today. And through that process, concluded on an approach that we're going to present today, which is a step forward on what I consider a path. It doesn't have to be a destination, but it's certainly a change from where you are today. The first thing we looked at was the existing services and facilities. You have 2 dedicated older adult facilities that we observed are largely in the south of the community, and did seem to create, through conversation and obviously visually, a different ability to access those services depending on where you lived. Certainly there's other recreation centres that do offer programming, they're just not dedicated to older adults. And through the observations and conversations, there were definitely discussions about whether those centres are able to offer inclusive services to every member of the community or not. One of the key pieces of feedback that we did get through the process from the residents we consulted with is there's a fairly diverse community of organisations that exist within the town, which is to be expected. And I suspect this is far from static. It will change over time as people identify new things they want to do. But along with that, the feedback we got is it isn't very easy to navigate. It's a sort of need to know, and that these groups don't necessarily work together very well. So as somebody who's entering the part of their life where they're thinking about participating with these sort of organisations, it was reflected to us that that isn't easy for me to access. One of the things that was commented to me was that once an individual found a group that seemed a reasonable fit, they largely stuck with it. And so that concept of what the groups offer and me accessing the things that match my interests was felt to be difficult. It's difficult to navigate, difficult to discover. In these 2 factors of where you are able to deliver services and that diverse community of other groups suggested to us that the town had an opportunity to play a coordination role in that ecosystem, where you would spend more time understanding who's delivering what, spending more time thinking about whether there are needs that are unfulfilled, spending more time working with those community groups to try and influence what they're offering. And then in the final element of this concept, which Abdul will talk about, is potentially then filling a gap that no one in the community is meeting a need for. So that was the first element, is really understanding what the whole community needs and what the whole community receives today. The second element was working more to offer a service to both older adults, but to those community groups, potentially as a centralized information resource. You already have some of that on the website. You provide some information resources, but taking that up to the next level about making sure that you're the place I can go to find out who's offering what in the community. So much more involved than where it is today. We also talked about the idea, and it would depend on the community group potentially, but are there other infrastructure elements that the town is well capable of offering? You have a robust recreation programming capability and infrastructure to support it. Many of these groups, volunteer-based, low funding, limited resources. So we certainly think there's some opportunities, whether it goes from simple information into potentially supporting registration, whether it's providing capabilities around marketing and communication for these organizations. We think there's a range of resources the town can consider extending to different community groups who are interested to support them in their efforts to communicate with the community. And the final element of this coordination was that working with the groups to make sure that there's more understanding about who's doing what and having some influence over what those groups offer the community. When you become aware of something that the community is looking for, that you think that these groups are well placed to offer. So a much more involved conversation to try and make sure that that map at the beginning doesn't limit the ability for people in the community to access the sort of older adult programming that suits their needs. So the first element of our recommendation we've referred to as the coordination role. So I want to hand over to Abdul to pick up on the next part of the recommendation.
Hello, everyone. So when speaking to community groups, the older adults themselves and staff, we obviously will hear stories about we would like more of this, more of that. Whenever you ask someone what would you like, they will identify things that they would like. But when we dug a little bit deeper with what they've identified, and when we went and actually looked at what your peers provide, perhaps in large part because of the community groups filling in the gap, we didn't really identify any material gaps in the services that you provide in Ajax. They exist. You're very consistently compared to your peers providing the same level of service. And so it didn't stand out to us that there was something absolutely missing in what you provide. But we did identify some things that are worth investigating a little bit further. So for one, older adults are working further into life, so they were requesting potentially more evening activities. Physical activity is becoming more and more desired. I'm sure you hear enough about pickleball in this chamber here. And last is integrating older adult support into the existing programs that you do have. The example that I can think of off the top of my mind is happens to be a physical activity one as well, is if you have some physical activities that are not older adult specific, can they at least have some considerations for the older adults, such as the coach knows some movements that work better for someone that's not as mobile. That being said, in your role as a coordinator, you might identify some gaps more granularly than we could, particularly in the northern areas where you don't have facilities dedicated for older adults. And that gap in programming might be something where Ajax has a better role delivering services directly. We've categorized the potential areas into, one is a direct coordination with the Ajax Seniors Club more fulsomely than you do currently. The two that I point your attention to are in designing and delivering the programming in your two existing older adult facilities, and one is collaborating with the board, at the very least to have some influence in the direction of what's happening with your two facilities, your two older adult facilities specifically. And the other is coordinating with your other facilities as well. You have some facilities that are in the north, and while they don't offer dedicated older adult services, perhaps you can through those facilities. Additionally, we've heard that from the community groups that they would like to use your facilities more. That could include the older adult facilities that you have currently in the south, or your other entities as well. So to summarize, we consider this part of the model where you're actually a collaborator now. And in order for that to work, our first step is to take stock of the community needs based on what you learn as a coordinator in the larger community. Next is to work more directly with Ajax Seniors Club to create joint programming and scheduling for facilities, so more hands-on work with the Ajax Seniors Club than currently. Where it makes sense, deliver programming directly in your two older adult facilities, where the town is best positioned for that. And yeah, that's the coordinator, collaborator role. When we looked at your two older adult facilities specifically, we did identify that there were some gaps in the current model. That's to be expected. And they're volunteer-led organizations. There's limitations to what they can provide. But the biggest one that I want to point your attention to is the customer experience. If I were to come into one of your two older adult facilities right now, wondering where the programming is, having some questions, there's nobody there for me to speak to, right? And so with that, I think that what we've put forward in order for this operating model to work, you will need some additional staffing. I'll start first with the augmented role. So we've identified for the current manager, supervisor of recreation, and the community recreation coordinator, an augmentation of the role. What this means is just preparing them for the more active and direct delivery of services at the town of Ajax. But much of that can happen already. It doesn't need to wait. But we've also identified some additional roles that you'd need. The first and the obvious one is recreation programmers at your two facilities. I'll come back to implementing this in a moment and the fact that you can stagger this. It doesn't have to happen all at once. And the other is the facility coordinator for the facilities. This is more taking care of the day-to-day operations, opening the door, closing the door, and coordinating the cleanup of the facilities, which is something else that we heard in your two older adult facilities, not necessarily taken care of as much as they could have. So in summary, in terms of actually implementing this model, we're suggesting that you collaborate more directly with the Ajax Seniors Club. That could include directly collaborating with the board, but also in terms of designing and delivering the services yourselves. Next is supporting them with your existing assets. I'm talking here more specifically about the technology piece. They don't currently have technology in terms of recording who's coming in, mapping out the use of the facilities and the program pickup. And lastly, add the additional staff that we identified in order to implement the model. We've put together an implementation plan. The devil's in the details, but I think where I want to focus your attention on is, as I mentioned earlier, you could stagger the hiring and recruitment of new staff. There are things that you can take care of already with the augmentation of your roles. You can start to coordinate with the community groups almost directly. You don't need to wait for that. We've suggested that in terms of hiring the new staff, you start with one of the coordinators at your St. Andrew's facility, which is still going to be operational. We're thinking Q4 of 2025, when you've already learned a little bit from your direct involvement with the community groups and have identified where this new staff can be involved more directly. For the remaining ones, we think that the additional coordinator, hold off on that until you open up Pickering Village after the renovations are done. And I think that's the opportune time as well to bring in the coordinator, the facilities coordinator. Yeah. Open for questions. Yeah.
Regional Council Crawford. Sorry, I just.
Thank you, Madam Chair. My question is around transportation options, where it says no demand and no recommendation. I can tell you that is not true. There is demand, and I believe that the feedback, the much feedback that I have had from the senior community is that they are fine to pay to get onto a bus as long as they can get to where they're going when they want to get there and get there in one spot. So I'm not interested in shipping seniors from all over Durham Region into Ajax. I am interested in making sure that our current seniors have an opportunity to get to where they need to go when they need to go it. And I will tell you, as chair of transit, that will never happen on our public transit, not unless we have an incredible influx of dollars into the system, because we deal with Durham Region, not just Ajax. So, I mean, you're saying, I'm not saying that we should be investing in a bus. I'm saying that if there's an outside organization that we can work with, from what I've heard from the seniors, they don't mind paying for it. They just want reliable transportation. Some can drive, choose not to drive. Some can't drive anymore because of health things, but that doesn't necessarily mean that they don't want to be involved in things. And so I'm really disappointed that this is not being recommended and not looking at, this is not directed at you. It is because I don't believe it's true. Not from the feedback that I've received on a daily basis. So I don't know how to make that change, but that cannot stand. That we need to, because if it's $225,000 for an annual to have an outside operator look after that, if we were able to even break even on that, or even close to breaking even on that, it would be worth it. Then we don't have to make the capital investment. And what if we exceed that? What if more people take it up? Like, I think that I don't believe that that's true in my experience, in my current position, and I just don't believe that it's true. The other thing is, when you call an older adult from 55, the needs of an older adult at 55 are far different than the needs of an older adult at 60 plus. I'm 62, for instance. I've walked my dog 5K already today. I've done a full fit CrossFit class, and then I ran 5K after. I realize I'm not the average 62-year-old woman, but there's a lot more of us out there that are incredibly active and are looking for community that, like us, that have, for whatever reason, transitioned into a different state. Someday I might sit down and knit. I don't know. Probably not, because many have tried to teach me, and it's just not in my bandwidth. But I'm just saying, and there's nothing wrong with knitting. I'm not saying there's anything wrong with it, but there's got to be the availability for, if you're going to call 55 an older adult, then there's got to be the availability for programming for that. Pickleball, God, like that's utopia. I take it that was a pickleball court in your first page. That has to be like a utopia for pickleball. And the reason why it's so great, even though there's many, many young people that are playing it, is that it suits the needs. It's not as hard as tennis on the body. And so I understand why we have older adults being gravitated to that sport, because it keeps them active and keeps them moving. And yeah, we have to pivot to that. We have to, at some point, we've got to figure out between tennis and pickleball. That's just the way it is. Are you going to cut me off?
No, I'm going to ask if you're getting to your question.
Oh. No, I'm okay. Yeah. What do you think about that? Obviously, I'm just saying that. Yeah, I don't really know what I'm saying, but I'm frustrated by this. No disrespect to you, because honestly, what I have heard in my emails, on my phone calls, at the multiple meetings that I have had with transit, this is not what I'm hearing. So if you can answer that question, whatever that question is.
Through the chair to Councillor Crawford, I certainly can. Obviously, with these presentations, they're highly summarised from what's actually in the report, and so I'm going to sort of reference elements of the report. The first thing is, did we hear feedback on transit? Yes, loudly. But most of the feedback related to the dissatisfaction with Durham Transit, not with a desire for facility-related transit, and that's where we looked at. Is there a need to be moving older adults to, from, between facilities? That's not feedback we received. So in the report, what we've reflected is we have no evidence of a need or a demand for this. So we provided cost estimates of what it would be to provide a type of service in the report, so that it can come back to people like yourselves to say, do you still want to do it? I can't provide you with substantive evidence of a service between facilities in demand, but we can provide you with an indication, if you chose differently, what to do with that. So that's really what came through in our work. We did hear plenty of dissatisfaction with Durham Region Transit and the service, and that, but that's just, exactly. And so that's where we ended up on this, is we had the feedback, but it all related to Durham Transit. We didn't get anyone coming forward saying, this is the type of service that would really benefit our community.
Reason why is because when you only have one type of transit that you have offered, then of course that's all they know, right? All I'm saying is that we need to maybe we need to look outside the box. Maybe we need to look at providing something that, I don't know what that, believe me, I understand the Durham Region Transit thing intimately. So I understand we don't provide the service that everybody would like us to service. And we probably, maybe in the far future we'll get there, but we're not going to be there in the next 5-10 years. We're just not. So, do we look differently? Like I said, they wouldn't tell you because they don't know what the other options are, right?
So there was a second factor, again, we've noted in the report, which relates to existing transit that the town does offer. And there was 2 services, one to each of the older adult facilities that operate, which saw very low ridership, and have now, the service levels have been reduced in it. So again, looking for evidence of demand, we were unable to identify it. But again, going back to the report, we've presented it there because you may have a different experience. You may choose to direct staff in a different way. We did not yield anything that we can stand behind and say that substantively says we should recommend that. I think the second comments that you brought forward over the 55 to 62, yes, that was feedback we received. What I introduced this as is that, a path. The second part of the recommendation is to get more involved in the two senior facilities providing programming directly. And that actually partially plays towards your comment over the profile of the older adult community and the concerns about the sustainability of the organizations that are operating them. We had feedback of the interest in the various programming. So it doesn't explicitly say you should program this here, but it opens the door to say, we think that you should be broadening the reach for the community from those facilities. And partially, as I say, to help with the sustainability of the clubs that are operating today. There was a comment on the board about volunteerism. That was some of the feedback we had, is the decline in volunteerism. So again, not explicitly said you should provide this, this, and this, but we wanted to set a path where you can be more involved in that programming from those facilities for some of the reasons that you've highlighted.
Through the chair to Regional Councillor Crawford, if I can hop in on this point, one of the things we hear from our seniors clubs over the years is that those older adults, 55 age range plus, typically aren't going to the seniors clubs for programming. The feedback we hear is they're coming to us, to our community centers for our fitness programs, our community centers and everything else that we do. It would be our intent, with a level of influence and potentially staffing on seniors club board, to be able to more directly deliver some of those more active programs within those community centers. So the point that you're trying to make is just what is being recommended here.
Councillor Henry.
Thank you, Chair. So you are the folks that we had meetings with, correct? One-on-one consultations with. So I'm going to start by saying, first of all, welcome. Thank you for your presentation. Enjoyed our meeting. I'm going to say yes to everything Regional Councillor Crawford just said. Absolutely, 100%, positively yes to everything she just said. So in our discussions, I mentioned myself, Regional Councillor Lee, we represent the most diverse ward in the town. And we have, and I can tell you the streets, I'm not going to name them, but I can tell you, I've looked it up on my map, I know the houses, I've walked them. I can tell you what area they're in, and I mentioned it in our conversation, that we have sandwich generations in that area. A lot of sandwich generations. And we have newcomers to Canada who speak English, might not necessarily read and write English, but speak English. Folks that are in my age group, a little bit younger, that are going to work, and the kids at home after school. And we know that those seniors are stuck at home all day because they're not necessarily driving. I have a huge area of them. They're not getting out to the events. The coordinations that are happening for South Ajax. They have no way to get to South Ajax. The transportation is not there. They are not going to get on a regional bus to get there because, quite frankly, it's not coming close enough to their homes to get to it. 100%, we need more programming in the north for Audley Centre for these seniors. But we also talked about the fact that when the folks get there and the programming is there, sometimes we're having issues with what will they be eating when we're having lunches, different groups that have different lunch events and whatnot. The food for what they would be eating is not also part of that programming. So we have to be looking at whether that requires halal or different dietary needs, but South Asian foods being presented at these events. There's a lot of stuff that I'm not seeing in this report that we had discussions on. So I'd like to go back and say again, yes to what Regional Councillor Crawford said, 100%. And we need to be looking at some way to either get transportation to get these folks, because it's all like one area where you could run a nice little bus through there, pick some folks up and get them to these programs. And they would be more inclined to participate in these programs if we had transportation for them, if we had, inclusion of food and other things once they got to these programs. So there's some stuff I'm not seeing in this report that I was really looking forward to, and I thought, hey, this is great. We had a great discussion. It's going to be in there. I'm a little disappointed it's not. I'm hoping that staff are hearing our concerns here with regards to what we're hearing from our residents, emails, phone calls, and even just canvassing in an election, going door to door and hearing from seniors saying, you know what, I'd like to be able to get out during the day and do a few things, and I don't want to wait for my daughter to get home. It's, you know, she's had a long day at work, and now she's got to take me to this program or that I couldn't get there during the day and do it. So this is a big piece of the puzzle that seems to be missing here. I don't know if you have further opportunity for more consultation. I do thank you for your report. Like, it's a good report, but this is a big piece missing from this puzzle. So,
through the chair to Councillor Henry, we received your feedback, other people's feedback around some of the issues you've talked about. I'm not going to focus on the transit, but you know, the inclusivity, let's call it.
yes.
It was clearly highlighted. We also heard from people who said, this is what we've done about that, and we've tried this, and it didn't work, and we don't know what the answer is. We heard from some other people who said, I'm not sure I want to be co-opted into doing that. I'm quite happy with what I have. What we've tried to do, and I keep going back to this idea of the path, is start out with that idea of let's work out what's in the community already before we try and fix something. So that first role that we talked about, that coordination, was to figure out what's going on in the north and where the real gaps are from what's already in existence. We certainly heard quite loudly about the difficulty of navigating the various groups that exist. So that was our attempt to start that path, is to start to figure out much more strongly who's delivering what. We know there are groups that are focused on different aspects of the community quite tightly. And many of the members of those groups potentially don't want to travel. So our focus was to start with the idea of can we work out what degree there is provision of services in geographically located that may meet some of those needs that aren't necessarily provided by the town, and if there remain gaps and if there remain programming the town should provide, then using the facilities you have to start to offer those. So I see what we've recommended here as more as a path to move down to make sure that the community is being serviced with the resources that are already available in the community, and where that need isn't being met, then the town's going to step forward. When it comes back to the transit, I'll reiterate the previous answer. The information we were given did not strongly advocate for transit that worked between town facilities, but we did hear strongly about the weaknesses of the existing transit infrastructure writ large, and we've included some indications of a service that could be provided and the cost associated with it if you choose to go in that direction. We just didn't receive the degree of evidence that we could stand there and say, that's the sort of transit service that you should be running, the substantive need.
Yeah, I'm hearing you and I'm understanding where you're coming from, and I appreciate that. Like, as a consulting firm coming in, I do appreciate that. Again, I have to agree with my colleague. Like, the information we receive far supports that there is a bigger need here for the transit piece that, again, will not be met by Durham Transit. And it's just not the model that they're offering, right? So I'm understanding and hearing you. Thank you for your time.
Thank you. Councillor Tyler Moran.
Thank you,
Oh,
I'm here, yeah. Okay, thank you, Madam Chair, and thank you, gentlemen, for being here. Just want to look at some statistics here, if I may. So I see 34,000 in the town of Ajax that are over the age of 55, as per your page 15. Okay, so there's that stat that you've provided. And then, do you know how many people are part of the Ajax Seniors Clubs? Do you know how many members there are? Okay, it's okay if you don't know. It could be 400, 500, whatever. And do you know how many people that you spoke to at the, like, do you consulted with the seniors that we see there that are there all the time? Like, was it You just spoke to the, if you don't know, you don't know, it's okay. Okay.
So to your point, a small percentage, probably in the region of 40 to 60.
Okay. And I think that one of the major things I don't see here, and just correct me if I'm wrong, is do you know how many of the seniors, and this would be amazing to have this stat, are online and how many aren't? Did you speak to anybody, like did that come up? I imagine it would have came up.
So as a topic, it was discussed. In previous work that we've done here, we did a survey on communication preferences, and the vast majority, and I think we did present some of the stats there when it comes to the seniors, do not have an online communication preference. In the discussions we had, there was a number of people that called for the return of the newsletter. And it was expressly, and we do make passing reference in the report to that. So communication preferences were represented. I know from experience in doing these consultations that the discussion over communication preferences splits the group. There's plenty of people who will say, yeah, I got online the first moment I could. I'm talking older adults. There's plenty of people who say, I won't do that ever in my life. It's definitely an issue that pervades not just this sort of conversation. I think where we see the prevailing direction when it comes to communications is we have to do multi-channel communications. Whether there remains a preference for the newsletter or not, we still have a responsibility to offer. So that's sort of generally the position we land.
Okay. So I would probably think it's more like 80-20, not really split. I would imagine about 80% of the people, just guessing, are now online, have an online presence. Most of my parents have passed, but most of my friends say, oh, my mother loves her, her iPad, and she takes pictures of her iPad, and she's always on Facebook. Like, oh, okay, so that person's, they're in the game. We can get to them with what we would now refer to as our regular channels. What I'm really concerned with, and you already know where I'm going with this, is a few years ago we had a thing called the News Advertisers. Not a big deal. It was a big community paper, and across the GTA, it got shut down one day. The whole thing, one day, gone. And that's where we have a gap. And those are the people I'm most concerned over. And I don't know what the move is, but again, I don't mean to keep saying this is not in, but I think it's important that is in the report that's saying these 18%, this 22%, these 750 people that we've identified, we're with you. We're going to get you the information. We're going to bring it to your house. Whether or not we do some door knocking and say, here's some information. I don't know what the move is, although we'd be into that. But it's just something I wanted to inject. It's something that I will change to think. I know is really important. So hopefully that becomes part of it. And even if you're online, are you on social media? Because that's another thing. Because some people, can maybe text and they think they're online, but they don't have a clue about, Okay, enough said. But please, everyone that's listening, all the staffers, I think everybody knows, right? Thank you so much.
Through the chair to Councillor Tallamore. There is passing reference in the report to exactly what you mentioned. There is a page that talks about communication preferences. Where we leaned into, again, I refer to the path, was the Ajax Seniors Club does provide a newsletter at the moment. It's run by volunteers.
Physical?
Yes, that's our understanding. What we've suggested is that in that collaboration with the Ajax Seniors Club, you have resources that could be brought to bear to help them with that process and get a larger distribution through it. So again, not necessarily the town taking it on saying we're going to be doing it, but certainly you have some resources that you can supplement what the volunteers are trying to do, and they already have a physical news group. Potentially that's about expanding the distribution beyond just members. The other element that we think would be really key around this is that online information resource that's broadly reflecting the entire community and what's happening. And again, potentially that role with ASC is moving that into the physical form as well, rather than you taking it on and distributing, the recreation brochure again.
Right.
So we've set a path. We heard from the seniors that they had, many of them said they had a preference for physical. As I said, I think you have a responsibility to, as you referenced, normal channels and historic channels. Let's talk about.
Yeah, because I can tell you by experience that when you tell somebody what's going on, again, I don't want to come up with a stat, but it seems like they go, oh, now I know. And they feel a lot better, even if it's something that's challenging in the community or something we have to do. But enough said about that. Okay, thank you.
If I can just jump in 1 second through the chair to Councillor Tyler Morin. For our older adult group, we continue to do a printed guide for each program session for the 55 plus that's focused solely on older adults and seniors programs. That's recognizing the need for multi-channel communications to that group. That continues to be the one target area that we continue to provide through print. Those guides are distributed at the community centers. We distribute them at all of the senior centers. We also do drops at several of the other non-town centers around town as well.
Councillor Bauer?
Thank you, Chair Dies. Good afternoon. Thank you very much for the presentation and the report. I really liked the comment, first of all, the community groups. I noticed that there were 7 groups mentioned in the report, I guess, that you talked with. I think that's great, and each group is vital to our town and offering services to our older adults. I see representation. I think the chair of Probus or president of Probus is here with us today. Thank you for coming out. And I love the comment about older adults or residents in our town can only find out what one group offers, and they may not know about the others. And so having someone or having the town resource to pool all of that, I think that was the takeaway for consolidation. I think that's an excellent idea. So thank you for that. And I also, I wanted to talk about the flow chart as well of staffing, but agreeing with the comments made regarding transportation. So during your survey, for the people in the north that you were able to question, and they didn't really show interest in or didn't have comments about transportation or needing or wanting a bus service, I guess, between facilities. So I guess I even preface that with the comment that they don't have access to a lot of the services up there, the programs, because they seem to be more geared in the south. So knowing that, was it asked if there was a bus service that could bring you from the north to the south to access those programs? Is that something that you would want? Was that question asked?
Through the chair to Councillor Bauer, the question was not framed that way. Obviously, that's a very leading way of framing it. The questions were asked in an open manner. So the question would be something along the lines of what transportation would be beneficial, or what difficulties do you face with transportation, so that they get the opportunity to respond openly. In asking questions about transit, we universally, as I said earlier, got critiques of the service provided by Durham Regional, and not people coming forward saying, it would be great if I was able to do this. So no, we didn't ask the question in the way you're framing it, unfortunately.
Okay. So there was no question about if there was a bus service to get you where the services were, would you make use of that service?
The question was not framed in that way. It was more about your need for transit and what would be beneficial. Yes.
Okay, so that maybe answers some of the questions of why there was no talk about this desire for bus service, because there is, I hear it too. But then also the comment was about a weekly bus that St. Andrews offers for facilities or special events. And the comment about lower ridership is because the timing is inconvenient and they might have to wait till 4:30 or later in the day for that kind of stuff. So taking that finding, and maybe this is for Director Vita, so knowing that now as a result of the report, is there a way to mitigate that?
Through the chair to Councillor Lisa Bauer, we've got a few staff here that I think I'd like to ask to come up to speak to our experience with respect to providing the bus shuttle for the senior centers, which we've done one for programming directly to the buildings as well as for special events. I'm not sure, Maninder, did you want to come up to speak to this one? So Maninder has overseen this bus service for a number of years, including the reductions that she's made due to low ridership.
Thank you, okay. Hello, Mo.
Hello, okay, perfect. So before the pandemic, I would say in 2019, we did offer 2 bus services, so one at Pickering Village and then one at St. Andrews. we've tried to reinstate both buses at both locations. With St. Andrews, we are offering a bus once a week, and I would say we have about 8 to 10 members. But for Pickering Village, we are not seeing that interest. Like, we've offered every single year, and that engagement isn't there. There's a lot of seniors that are either, I would say, carpooling with each other, or I would say they're more traveling in groups. So we're not seeing that interest. For our events, let's say like the barbecue, we do see about 25 seniors that do use that service, but let's say the wellness fair, because the event is in the south, we don't see much engagement there.
So thank you for that answer. So when you say the bus service is offered, does that mean there's a bus that would go up to Audley Rec, for instance, and pick up residents from there and bring them?
Yes, that's correct. It would visit each community center and then some of our senior residents, so Ashley Manor, 92 Church Street, some of those locations.
Okay. Okay, that's very interesting, and I wonder if that's for lack of awareness or inconvenience to get there, or they're unable to get to the rec center. Anyway, okay, thank you. Okay, thank you for that answer. And then my other question was about the 2 X's on customer service. So, which, not happy to see that for sure. So who would be, how do we, what was the report recommendation for solving that? And as part of the flow chart, I'm guessing it's someone in the new staffing flow chart.
Through the chair to Councillor Bauer. I'll take the 2 X's first. There is simply no full-time town staff in the facilities, full stop. There's the volunteers are in that. So that's where that assessment comes from. The recommendation was to have a greater involvement in programming in those facilities, which would require town staff. And in the organizational chart, there are 2 programming coordinators down on the bottom left of the chart, one for each facility, with the suggestion that Abdul made that once you renovate the second facility, that would be the appropriate time to look at that position, not prior to it. So it was those 2 positions that would address directly the customer service and the town delivered programming coordination in those facilities.
Okay. And then is it the recommendation that town staff join the board of the Ajax Seniors Club with the path to moving to a staff run facility, so to speak? Like, is that the reason we're doing that?
We've gone twofold on this. We haven't gone that far.
Okay.
We've taken the first step, which is staff in the facility, but then one of the other positions of town staff working with the board to coordinate that programming and influence it. Whether it became a position on the board, I would expect that's in negotiations with ASC, as opposed to something that we would propose directly. And then in terms of the evolution, we're very aware of the sustainability concern of volunteer organizations. So again, does it stay with these recommendations in 3 years' time? I suspect not. I suspect that the town takes another step on the path. But at this point in time, we think this is a good establishment framework that gets you into direct delivery in those facilities and a very close relationship with the volunteer organization.
Right. Okay. 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 Thank you very much. I think that's an excellent recommendation as well, by the way, to have town staff on that executive board. Okay. Those are my questions. And I think I just want to confirm, this is the analysis that I believe in our budget last year was an item that had been pushed forward, but then as a result of consultation was put back in for this year. And if I'm correct on that, I'm very happy to see that. Thank you. Okay, thank you. Those are my questions.
Are there any further questions? Regional Councillor Crawford.
Okay, my last rant. So in order to get to Audley, there's no way to get to Audley if you actually need a bus. So like Ward 2 is incredibly dense. So you could be, like in the middle of Ward 2. If you can't get to Audley, then the likelihood is you're not going to make it on a shuttle bus if that's your only option. Just making a point. I'm done. There's no question. I'm just making a point.
Thank you.
Sorry, through the chair to Regional Councillor Crawford, I did just want to mention, and not sure if this was due to your advocacy or not, but there has been a Durham Region Transit stop added just in front of Audley Recreation Center recently, and there is regular transit bus service there currently.
Thank you. Appreciate your report. So can I have, please, a motion to support the recommendation? Okay, Sterling, thank you. Councillor Lee? It's to be it was for endorsement by council, so, yeah. Yeah, so support them, support the recommendation, endorse it. Okay, we good with that? Come on. Thank you. That's it's moved forward. All right, so next on our list is 6.4 of the presentations regarding the HR strategy update.
Thank you, Madam Chair. I'll just jump in here if I could. I'd just like to take a moment to introduce Stacy Hushin, who is the Vice President of Strategy Corps, which is the company that we've retained to complete our HR strategy. And as council members will recall, this project was identified in council's strategic plan. It's well underway at this point. The work's being led by Stacy and her team. And so what we have for you today is just a very brief presentation. It's just a few slides, really intended to give council a high-level update on the project, but more importantly, to give you an opportunity just to provide some input on the things that you view as priorities for the future as we develop this roadmap for our HR division. So with that, I will just turn it over to Stacy.
Am I good? Okay, great. Usually when you see red, that means it's not working, but I guess when you see red, that is good. So thank you to the members of the committee for having me today. I think we're really excited about this strategy, and I know the town is as well. So as you know, we were retained to support the development of an HR strategy, and this is one of the initiatives coming out of the core services reviews conducted in 2023, and it also relates to the corporate strategic plan under the priority, equipping our workforce for the future. It also feels timely to undertake this strategy in the current moment. You know, Ajax is a mid-sized community, and over the next couple decades, you're probably going to hit about 200,000 people. And so, you know, over the last 5 years, you've seen your organization grow in step with that community growth, which makes sense because you need staff to deliver the programs and services and infrastructure that residents rely on, and to be able to meet those increasing demands as you grow. Right now, you've got about 1,000 employees who are delivering those services, and there has been growth over the past couple of years. And people, as I'm sure you all know, are critical to the success of every single organization. And in a municipal context, they're critical enablers to getting anything and everything done and delivering those services that make Ajax a great community to live or to work, to visit and recreate. And, you know, as well as achieve your big goals for the future, in addition to the things that you're doing on a day-to-day level. And it's great to have a strategic plan and to have, you know, those big goals and the big vision for the future. But we also need to look at the foundation and what you need to deliver that progress and deliver the things that matter to you and to all the community members that you serve. And I always say, you know, you need that foundation of people, processes, financial resources, and technology to really be able to make meaningful progress on some of these big priorities. this will become important as you grow as well. You know, making sure that your organization is evolving and maturing in step with what you're seeing in the community, and making sure that you've got the capacity within the organization to be able to respond to the changing and evolving needs of your community members. As we just heard in the last presentation, right, on the older adults operating model analysis, you're going to be looking at potentially some changes to make sure that you're responsive. With that comes perhaps, at council's direction, some changes within the organization to be able to undertake that work. And, you know, when I'm talking about organizational change, it doesn't always mean adding more staff. It can, it has, it probably will in the future at some point. But it also means leveraging and investing in the staff that you have today, growing them, developing them, as well as adapting processes and structures to improve collaboration within the organization, reduce, you know, inefficiencies, and let's say also free up time and space to really be able to do the important stuff, those things that are in your strategic plan. Those things are going to make you an attractive organization and community moving forward. The town has made some important strides over the last couple of years, including the recent compensation review, as well as moving forward with the new human resources management system, which is a significant and critical project. But there are also other opportunities that we think will be identified through this strategy, namely how we can support the organization in transitioning the HR function from one that is primarily focused on, you know, the day-to-day administration of HR, kind of what we picture to be classic HR, to thinking about, you know, HR as more of a strategic partner within the organization that can do all of those day-to-day things, but also advance some of those critical people priorities that are going to support organizational resiliency and sustainability now and into the future. And I think, you know, just to add a bit of context, as I'm sure, you know, members of the committee are aware, this is kind of critical at a time when many municipalities are facing challenges attracting and retaining talent. We recently had the privilege of working with the Association of Municipalities of Ontario on their workforce development project, and supported a survey of over 2,400 municipal employees. And you know, what was interesting is that we found that municipal careers are not on the radar of many people today. There's a whole host of reasons why that may be, but what that means is that municipalities need to work a little bit harder in thinking about how they recruit. They need to maybe be more creative in how they do that. That includes thinking about not only what you're offering, but even the types of places that you're posting the job ads. You know, we also heard through that survey that, you know, a critical driver of job satisfaction and retention is compensation. But, you know, tell me of one sector where that's not the case. But what was interesting in these survey findings is the other things that, you know, municipal employees are looking for in their jobs that you know, might feel a bit different. Things like career pathways, professional development opportunities, opportunities for growth. And we know that employee expectations of the workplace, they're changing. We saw this during COVID, we're seeing it now. Employees want more flexibility. They also want modern workplaces with progressive policies that can support them on their career journey. And so the reason I'm sharing this context is because what this all means for you folks is that a lot of municipalities are doing exactly what you've had the foresight here in Ajax to do, which is to develop that forward-looking strategy to make sure that you've got the systems, the structures, the policies in place to be able to attract and retain your talent at a moment when the job market is highly competitive for municipal employees. And so our goal as part of this project is to develop that forward-looking strategy across the entire organization to align talent and capacity that will in turn enable the town to deliver on the strategic priorities you've set out in the plan, deliver the core services that you deliver each and every day, implement council's decision, but also make sure that you can be that employer of choice. So in terms of where we're at in the project, our approach is collaborative in nature. We've spent about the last 2 months engaging with staff from across the organization. From our perspective, staff know the ins and outs and are often best positioned to identify those areas that are working well, those areas that need improvement, as well as opportunities that should be further explored. We're still completing the final phase of this engagement, this initial engagement, which is why I'm here today to hear from members of council. But, we'll also be moving into putting together our findings in terms of understanding some of those gaps and opportunities for further exploration over the next 2 months or so. And then, we'll be coming back to the senior management team as well as to council with a strategy and an implementation plan. It is expected that our recommendations will require some time and investment to implement, that these are not all going to be overnight action items. And so, we will look for your feedback as well as the feedback of staff as we move forward with the project. In terms of some of the engagement activities we've undertaken, we've conducted interviews with the CAO and the senior management team, the manager of HR, and representatives from the union. We've also had the opportunity to do a series of workshops with each town department, as well as some focused discussions with, the DEI group, the Wellness Committee, the Health and Safety Committee, and payroll, which allow us not only to surface those strengths, weaknesses, opportunities, and threats, but also to dive a bit deeper into the mandate areas of those groups. We also have an employee survey out right now that is still live, and we're still encouraging staff to fill out if they haven't had the opportunity. And of course, we're here to hear from council. This is an initial phase of engagement. We expect that there will be a need for continued engagement as we move forward with the project and start mapping out that strategic roadmap for the future. And so that brings me to the true purpose of my visit to the lovely town of Ajax today, which is to really hear from council and gather, council's input as stewards and as leaders of the town's organization. In particular, we'd like to get a sense of what you think the town should be focusing on as it develops this strategy and as you think about the needs of the organization and making sure that you can continue to be a great place to work. We did put a few options on the slide as thought starters. Those aren't intended to be the scope of the discussion, but merely to support you as you think about some of the things that could emerge through this discussion. And with that, I'm happy to take any comments and feedback from council.
Thank you very much for your presentation. So we do have a question from Regional Councillor Lee.
Not so much a question, more just some of that input you're asking. So should surprise no one in this room, diversity, equity, inclusion is a huge focus of mine. I think Ajax has been very lax in a lot of the policies we've implemented, and it's reflected in the staff that we have from upper management on down. So I'd like to see more diverse in our staff, more inclusion, equity, the full 9, because I think we're very much, we like to pride ourselves on it, but I think we're not reflective of that at the actual population. And then mental health as well. I think, COVID was especially hard on a lot of us, and we've had to initiate a lot of change, whether it's work from home or hybrid or whatever, in a very short amount of time. And I'd love to see a focus on mental health and just ensuring that our employees are doing okay, so to speak. And those are my 2 cents. Thank you.
Do we have any questions or comments from council? Okay. Thank you very much for your presentation.
Thank you.
So we're just going to move on to the last item on our agenda, which is an appeal of the property standards with respect to animal services. Just take a second. Thank you, Mr. Hannan.
Good afternoon. So I provided in the report that we had a animal complaint regarding a dog bite. The officer investigated the incident. The found that there was a previous history on the property as well involving the same dog. The officer issued an order to restrain, which is a subsequent order that was already issued about confining the dog on the rented premises to make sure that they couldn't make contact with the tenant. The order was given out to Mr. Oliveira. He exercised his options to appeal that order before the committee. The item was brought forward before the Property Standards Animal Services Appeal Committee. It was heard. The committee deliberated the evidence that they heard from all parties that attended, and they made the decision to uphold the order as was written by the officer. Mr. Oliveira also has a right to appeal that decision after paying the appropriate fees to the town, to this committee, and he exercised his right and did so. A letter was hand-delivered to Mr. Oliveira outlining the date and time of the meeting today. It was delivered to him in person. It advised him that the meeting today started at 1 p.m., that there were several things on the agenda for committee, and that his matter, he may have to wait to hear his matter. I've just checked the hallway now. I don't see Mr. Oliveira present. And that's staff's position in the recommendation is that we believe that the order was heard by the committee, was upheld appropriately, and that was their decision, and we believe that the committee's decision should be the same.
Thank you, Mr. Hannan. So obviously, there's the owner of the dog was not here today to answer any questions if council had any. Is there any from Mr. Hannan that you have? Okay, Councillor Lee? Sorry, it does know his recognized.
Thank you, Chair. Just very quickly, you mentioned that they had to pay to set up this appeal?
As part of the fees and charges bylaw, to be able to bring the matter forward from the Property Standards Appeal, there's a fee of $500 to bring it forward.
Okay, and they're not even online or anything?
No,
Okay.
I've done.
Yeah, okay, no further questions.
Ready to go?
So through you, Madam Chair, I would
consideration?
just look for a mover to uphold the decision as outlined in the staff report.
So you're moving that, Nancy? Councillor Henry? Okay. Does it require a full vote for this appeal?
Sorry, can you repeat yourself?
Differently for a GGC vote, does it require all of us to vote on that?
Yeah, so everybody will vote. We'll just need a majority decision of
So it's
council.
just not, and I don't need a seconder, correct? That's
yes, we're voting yes to uphold the decision.
correct.
No.
To upholding the decision that was previously made by their committee, yes.
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 Yes is we agree with staff, no is we don't.
No.
Through the chair, the recommendation is to uphold the order of the Property Standards
Correct.
Animal Services Committee. Yes would be to uphold.
So you can vote now. It's clarified. No, you're good. Okay, it's been supported. Thank you. Yes, go ahead.
Thank you, Chair. I just want to wish my wife a 36th wedding anniversary today.
That's very good.
Was she watching?
There's no comment.
When I get home, I'll
Point of order.
punch it up.
Strike it from the official
Can I have a
record.
motion to adjourn then?
And I motion to
You wanna
adjourn
do
so I
that
can get
one?
home, yes.
Okay, all in favor? Do we have to vote on that too? Thank you very much, everybody, for your patience.